Question: have you become a member of the Unfound discussion group on Facebook yet? On Monday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern on the Unfound Podcast Channel on YouTube, yours truly hosts a live show in which I talk about some of my personal life, I discuss recent true crime news, and I preview that Friday's episode. But I also take questions from the audience. Since I know many of you have not yet checked out the live show, today and for the 6th time, you will get to hear me answer a long list of questions I've received recently and over the past year. I'm Ed Denzel, and this is Unfound. Unfound News. Regarding updates for the TV shows in which I will appear concerning Janelle Matthews and Steve Pankey, the Dan Abrams episode has still not aired, and I've not yet been given a date. And the series where I went back to Greeley, Colorado in December is, to my knowledge, still due to be played in August. Next, update episode 17 will be coming out the last Friday of this month. Lots to talk about. I may have to divide it into 2 episodes. That is how much has gone on in the past 4 months. Finally, I did my first live show using my tablet as the camera while I was on the road with my brother Brian in his RV this past Monday. It worked out well. Good to know this will be an option for the future. Okay, since this is Q&A episode number 6, I think many of you know how this goes. And in fact, these Q&A episodes go very much the way the update episodes go, in that I don't have a script in front of me. And in fact, for these questions, except for some specific questions later that I will answer, I don't have anything written at all. So all of these answers you are going to hear are right off the top of my head. Although I've looked through the questions and determined how I'm going to answer them, I don't have anything written down. However, given that this is recorded, I'm guessing that some of these maybe I started into them and then kind of got off track and had to redo it. But except for some questions later in which I will tell you that I'm reading from some notes, other than that, all of this is off the top of my head with no notes at all. So please forgive the ums and knows and pregnant pauses, etc., that you know do not happen in the regular Unfound podcast episodes. In addition, I tried to mix these up between disappearance / true crime stuff and non-disappearance true crime stuff. I tried to, so we kind of at least a little bit go back and forth just to keep everything kind of fresh, I guess. Okay, let's get started. I think there are 20-some questions here. I did not count them, but I know they're over 20, but there's not 30 of them. Let's get started. First question, and this comes from a listener who obviously knows that I used to live in Las Vegas. I lived there from 1998 to 2011, 13 and a half years, worked in entertainment most of that time. And the question is, being that the Tropicana is being dynamited and destroyed, completely leveled, so I think they're going to put a baseball park in there, do you have any memories of the Tropicana? And the question is, yes, I do. A very, very specific one. As some of you know, I used to be an independent filmmaker. I worked with some men and women from about 1999 until about 2006, before I decided that I had had enough of that and really, I have to be honest, did not enjoy the collaborative artistic process too many, how do they say, too many chefs in the soup, something like that. And it just got to me after a while, so maybe it's, I guess, no surprise to all of you that I just do this podcast by myself. Although I have assistants, we work on other things together. But the podcast is done by me and me alone, except for, of course, some of the assistants, of course, finding guests to appear on the podcast. But all the writing and recording and interviewing and researching and everything else, that's done by me. Which, given how I acted when I was with a bunch of filmmakers, should be no surprise to anyone. I am an only child in most senses of the word. But the year was 2001, and we had a movie premiere scheduled. Pay very close attention to the date. September 13th, 2001. And we were showing the movie in the big showroom at the Tropicana. The way I remember it is we had some sort of person we knew who worked there in management, and it was the night that the show that was usually in that showroom was dark. And so it was available, and we could rent that showroom out and have all the cast show up, the production crew show up, a bunch of families and everybody were going to be flying in to show this independent movie at the Tropicana. But unfortunately, it was 2 days after September 11th. And in addition, the movie that we made, this independent movie, had to do with a bombing. You can't make this stuff up. In which a building was leveled. Was part of it. That was the main part of the plot, trying to figure out who blew up this building and why. And so the premiere of this movie, the showing of the movie on September 13th still happened. But before it, myself and the director of the movie had to get up in front of everybody and made sure everybody who was in attendance understood that this movie got made well before September 11th. And it's just an unfortunate coincidence that September 11th happened on a Tuesday. And then we had the showing of a movie about a bombing on that Thursday, 2 days later. And of course, because of everything that happened, no family could show up. My parents were supposed to fly in. A bunch of family members of the cast members were supposed to fly in. None of it happened. We still had the premiere, but of course, the people who showed up, it was like 1/3 or half of the people who were supposed to be there. So, I mean, in retrospect, the movie wasn't very good, and it really didn't affect anything regarding the distribution of the movie or anything. Anyway, like I said, there are other reasons I'm not a filmmaker anymore. But that happened at the Tropicana Casino and Hotel on September 13th of 2001. And thing is, I can remember like a couple days being all excited for this premiere. Oh, yeah, it's going to be great. Everybody's going to come. It's going to be fantastic. Going to have a big party and everything. And then, of course, everybody's mind immediately went to September 11th. And then we're thinking about what's going to happen. We're going to have this premiere. We decided to go through with it anyway, which was probably a mistake. But we did it, and it played, and then really that was about it regarding that movie. It never went anywhere. And like I said, it's not very good. The plot is great, but we certainly probably should have, given the money involved and everything else, we probably should have kept it to something a little simpler than a bombing and a complex plot and all these different locations and everything else. The thing, we learned. And we didn't learn it, unfortunately, that lesson when we came out with another movie in 2005, which was also kind of mystery, caper type of movie. And it once again involved a bunch of locations and everything else. We should have never done either of that. You live and learn, but once again, there's a reason I'm not a filmmaker anymore. But most of those people who I worked with still are. They're still doing stuff in Las Vegas, and very happy for them. But It was a bunch of things put together, but it was mainly, I don't, a lot of times I don't play well with others. So, that is my memory, as you can see why, of the Tropicana back in 2001. But what I will say about the Tropicana, it's getting dynamited or demolished, razed, R-A-Z-E-D, here in 2024. It should have been done 20 years ago. Even when we had that premiere there in 2001, it was looking dated. Of course, the Mandalay Bay's virtually across the street that had just been built. And, of course, the Bellagio was almost brand new. The Venetian was going up right around that time. Tropicana could have been demolished 20 years ago. And I think that would have just made more sense, made as much sense then as it does now. It was outdated way back then. But so that is a memory, the main memory. Was I in the Tropicana for other reasons after that? Yeah, but you can see why, of course, that would be the main memory for me for the Tropicana. Next question, and this kind of goes right in line, although certainly in a different direction, the opposite direction. That's the Tropicana memory is a very sad one. Kind of all these expectations, and then all that, that happened. It's the worst timing ever. But I did get a question. What is your favorite memory, your best memory from your time in Las Vegas? And I'm given the standards of this podcast overall, I have to keep this PG. So there are things that can't be talked about ever, never, not on this podcast ever. But my best memories of Las Vegas are all of the years that I worked at Star Trek: The Experience. I think I've said, and I think this is a question that's come up, or a topic that's come up on the live show on Monday nights, and you should be listening to it, by the way, if you're not. The live show I do on Monday nights on YouTube and Facebook starts at 9 p.m. Eastern. But the version of Ed Dentzel you hear these days, and all of you have gotten to know, is the version that was really crafted in those years at Star Trek, those 4.5 years. I would say my opinion, it was like I was quite a bit of a different person before then. And I think working there made me a better person. I think it really gave me a better personality because I worked with so many great people and people with fantastic personalities, very outgoing, very personable, could talk to anybody. And it really it continues to shape 20 years later who I am. And I gained some of my best friends, believe it or not, and they're women of all time, working there. And so that continued. Granted, it's not, maybe the person asked this question, they're maybe looking for a specific day or maybe just a couple of days. And if I had to get away from PG rate, I could certainly do that. But there really, I don't know, was any one particular day. It was just those years. And the funny thing is you really don't, maybe some of you feel this way too. You look back and you don't realize how good something was until it was over. And kind of like that Cinderella song, you don't know what you got until it goes gone. Of course, that's about relationships. But that's the kind of way it was. Don't get me wrong. While I was there, I knew this is unique and it's kind of a cushy job and it's fantastic and I'm a Star Trek fan and everything else. But there were a lot of people who worked there at the time who complained. And I wonder if they're complaining now 20 years later. I doubt it. They probably look back. And even me, though, I wonder, did I really enjoy it as much as I could have? But it was still pretty fantastic because of what it continues to give me now in 2024. Because when I started there, I wasn't even 30 yet. And now I'm 53, and it's still working there still is giving me gifts every day. And I mean that. From, once again, the person that I became, along with now all of the people who came into my life during that time. It's a gift that keeps on giving. And you even know one of them. I remember a few years ago, I appeared on my friend April A. Bear's podcast, Think It Through. Remember that, when I appeared on her podcast? She's one of those people. She's one of those people who I think very highly of. Had a lot of great times with April at Star Trek and her Christmas parties and everything else. So that is that memory, once again, of things that I can talk about publicly, that is one that just is fantastic. It's so unique, and people would travel from all the world to see us perform and everything. It was just fondest memory, PG memory. There you go, from Las Vegas. Next question for this Q&A episode, number 6. I have to admit, I didn't realize it was number 6. I was thinking it was like number 3, and then I started going back. I was like, oh my goodness, this is number 6. I didn't know. All right. What's the worst part and best part of your job doing the podcast? And this person also says, looking forward to the Q&A episode. I will start with is there a bad part of doing Unfound? Yes, there is. Like any job. I suppose even if you hit Mega Millions or Powerball for $1.3 billion, there can be downsides. People coming out of the woodwork saying, hey, remember me? Can you loan me a couple bucks? There's a downside to that too. So I'm very realistic regarding this. The worst part is that it's clear to me, and this not just goes for me, but I just think the true crime genre, it's obvious that law enforcement does not take us very seriously. And I would like to think that I take the work that I do as serious as anybody who takes their work seriously. Whether you're a teacher, an engineer, an accountant, whatever, professional athlete, I take my work as interviewing people, finding people, covering these disappearances as well as I can, as seriously as anybody takes, I think, any job. The difference, and I've brought this up, I don't know, maybe it's come up in the live show, but there are certainly people within the true crime genre, and I don't know how many people that is. When I say the true crime genre, people who actually host a YouTube channel or a podcast, something like that, who are certainly good enough that they could be valuable resources to police departments and the FBI and whatever, sheriff's office, whoever, regarding disappearances or serial killers or whatever else. For me, it would just be disappearances. I certainly believe what I've learned over the last 7.5 years, would be helpful to people who are doing law enforcement work. There's no doubt in my mind. And I've made the comparison that myself and a few others, you know me, I'm very picky about this stuff, but myself and a few others, if we were college athletes, like, for example, the March Madness just finished. If we were the versions, and I think we are kind of, like Caitlin Clark from Iowa, or some of these other players that were in March Madness, and of course they're going to get drafted, whether into the NBA, WNBA. There are people out there whose job is to look out, scouts for those NBA teams, WNBA teams, who are looking for people like Caitlin Clark. We want her on our team. She's going to get picked number 1. She can help us. The problem with law enforcement, at least in the United States, I'll just stick to my country, even though I know that Unfound has listeners all around the world. I'm not going to be an American telling people in other countries how what their law enforcement does. But here in the United States, law enforcement is not looking for any help. They're not looking for people outside of law enforcement who can help them. I would say, is the worst part of my job, because I think if myself and a few others, hosts, channel hosts, podcast hosts, that if we were doing something else, if we were college athletes, or we were students at MIT, and we were near the top of our class, that there would be companies or sports teams or whoever else just clamoring, just breaking down doors to hire us, recruit us, draft us, and everything else. But in law enforcement, they aren't looking for people like that. And this is a huge flaw in law enforcement in the United States. I get it. The FBI, for example, I think you have to have a college degree to become an FBI agent, or maybe even have to have your master's and everything else. But you could have your bachelor's and master's in anything. Likewise, to become a sheriff in most counties in the United States, you don't have to have a criminal justice degree. That's a political position. As we discover, like with Nathan Lewis in Hemphill County, you're just a politician like anybody else running for an office. Yet, law enforcement is not looking for people who, I'm certainly not an amateur. I'm a reporter. I get paid to do this, of course, through all the various means that Unfound makes money, so I'm not an amateur. But I am a professional reporter. And I've gained a lot of knowledge regarding disappearances that I certainly think could help law enforcement in solving some of their disappearances. But law enforcement isn't out there looking for people like that. And why? I think it's a variety of things. I think mostly it's just ego. I think it's arrogance and everything else. I think in the live show, within the last few months, I talked about how I talked to a retired FBI agent, and she readily admitted that the police departments out there, the reason they don't ask the FBI for help is because they're afraid the FBI will come in and solve their cases for them. And they're afraid of looking embarrassed, being embarrassed. That's a true story. So that's the worst part. Knowing that I can help a lot more, and the people who are in positions who can control that just aren't interested. And I would say if these police departments were actually running a business, any type of corporation or something, and they had this attitude, they would have been out of business a long time ago. So that's the worst part. Knowing that I can help a lot more than I can, and just being rebuffed here and here. There's no FBI or no sheriff's office or police department is not banging down Ed Densel's door saying, you know what, Ed, I think you can help us with some of these disappearances. If I were a professional athlete scoring 20 points a game and getting 10 rebounds, I'd have every NBA team contacting me. This is a big difference. Worst part of my job. Best part of my job is knowing that I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. I've said this before, that my brain goes very well with information and complex information. Being given a lot of facts and giving a lot of statements and everything, and being able to go through them and just really being able to, it's not easy, but to really pick out those points that are the main ones, or to go through a bunch of information, pages and pages and pages, and be able to pick out the contradictions very quickly. For some reason, my brain is very good at that. Don't ask me to manage people. So knowing that my brain is right in line with what I've chosen to do here is the best part. And, I admit, going back to the independent filmmaking and some other things, I thought that was what I was supposed to do, but, I never felt totally comfortable with that, with these other things. And then kind of this came along, and I've always been interested in disappearances, and my brain was like, oh yeah, this is what my brain is good at. And so that is the best part of my job. Then, of course, trying to help these people using your brain power for good. Because we know how many people use their brain power for bad. But using your brain power for good is a spectacular thing. Next question. Do you think any famous people listen to your podcast? Have they ever contacted you? Have a famous person ever contacted you and said, you know what, Ed, I listened to your podcast? That has never happened. First of all, the second part first, that has never happened. That somebody, whatever kind of fame we're talking about, whether it's an actor, actress, a director, or a famous author, or a famous athlete, or musician, or whoever, politician, whoever, leader of a country, nobody like that has ever contacted me. However, if you're out there, I'd love to hear from you. That would be, we could just keep it private. We could keep it private, certainly. If some famous person, Academy Award winner, Super Bowl winner, whoever, were to contact me and say, Ed, you know, I listen to your podcast every week. You're doing a fantastic job. That would just be the biggest hoot ever. But if any famous person would be worried that I might blab that, if you're listening out there, famous person, I would not do that. But I can tell all of you truthfully that's never happened. Now, the first part, do I think any famous people listen to the podcast? I do. It's just, if only for a percentages thing, an odds type of situation, in that Unfound is a fairly popular podcast, not the most popular. It's never going to be the most popular true crime podcast because we're in a very niche type of true crime topic. But certainly, famous people are no different than non-famous people. They have their own interests, and they have their own hobbies outside of their work, whatever has gotten them famous. And we know how much all of you take an interest in true crime, so it just makes sense that there are a lot of famous people, no matter how they got famous, that also take an interest in true crime one way or another, some sort of genre. Maybe it's just serial killers. Maybe it's, I guess you could put like conspiracies kind of in that as well, UFOs or whatever. And so I have to believe there are some out there that take an interest in disappearances, and they may have a lot of time on their hands. Maybe if they're traveling, if they're part of a sports team flying from city to city, what do they listen to? What do they watch? Or an actor on a set. There's a lot of downtime there waiting for everything to get set up. What do? Well, I think it's very possible that they listen to true crime. So I'm inclined to believe there are some famous people that listen to Unfound or have run across the podcast and listened to it. So I think so. The answer is, do I think famous people listen to your podcast? I do. Have any of them ever contacted you? Though the answer is no. I'll say it again, though. If any of them do want to contact me, just to say, hey, Ed, I'm a big fan, that would be like the coolest thing ever. And I promise I will not tell my audience who you are. Although I may tell my audience that some famous person contacted and said they were a listener. He or she was a listener. But that would be cool. Next question. Does my dad listen to my podcast? He once in a while brings up how when he's going like through YouTube on his smart TV, he'll run across like my live show or something like that. And his friend Dottie, who is tuned in, I think, to the live show once in a while, I know has told my dad, because if you listen to the live show, you know that I do talk about my dad once in a while. That she has passed along to him, that I've mentioned him. But no, my dad's not a big true crime guy. My mother certainly was. I mean, Unfound will never have a bigger fan than my mother was. She listened to every episode, and she and I would talk about the disappearance, of course, going way back to the beginning until she died there in late 2018. But we would talk about the disappearance that was featured that Friday. But my dad's really not into that, and I don't expect them to be. I don't feel bad about that. Anybody, not just in my family or friends or whoever, whether they listen to the podcast or not, I really don't care either way. I'm not looking for any validation. I don't need any of them to say, man, that was a great episode. As I've stated many times when it has come up regarding reviews that Unfound got like way back at the beginning, which were horrible, I just finally decided the podcast gets done no matter what. It gets done no matter what people think of it. So I really don't care if friends and family, of course, I love all of you listeners. Thank you for tuning in. But when it comes to the people who are closest in my life, whether they want to listen or not, I don't ask. They don't bring it up. If they don't bring it up, I just take for granted they're not listening. They got other things to do. And really, it doesn't bother me at all. In fact, given this question, I really don't even think about it until I'm asked about it. So, but I don't hold it against my dad. He's really not into this stuff. And, of course, as we know, a lot of people aren't. Next question. And this came actually from a guest, prior guest of Unfound. How many hours of training do state troopers in the police academy receive in missing persons? The answer is easy on that one. 0. I've done this. I've actually gone to a variety of universities who are prominently known for criminal justice programs. You will not find one class, one course. Now, granted, I didn't go through every one, but it's been a while. It's a few years. 10, looked at like 10, 12 different prominent, just looked up what are some of the criminal universities that are best known for criminal justice programs. Just went to them, went through, because you can find all their curriculums online, very easy to do. Not one has anything to do with missing persons cases or disappearances. Not one. So when I've gone to Florida Atlantic or Nova Southeastern or some of the other schools that I've attended and spoken to, those criminal justice majors, that is the only talk they will get in their entire, 4 years, 5 years program. That's it. So the answer is 0 as far as schooling. Now, after that, I think any sort of seminars that people who are already police officer investigators could go to kind of get additional training, continuing education, we might call it, or something like that. The answer is also 0. None. Not important. Now, why is that? Why do they get a lot of training in forensics and people's rights and all of those things in contrast to disappearances? I think, first of all, we have to remember that disappearances that last longer than a week are fairly rare. That doesn't mean they don't have an impact on society, though. I cover disappearances because they are important, not because they're common. It's a very important distinction. All right, I cover disappearances, I feature them, I work on them because I see the damage that they do to societies and people and families, not because they're common. These disappearances that we feature on Unfound that are over a year old are somewhat rare, but they're still important. But I think that it's just not a concern because police look at that. Well, it's rare and we'll just deal with it. We have domestic abuse calls happening every day. We have robberies happening every day. We're getting calls about sex abuse, children being abused sexually every day. So we're going to concentrate on those. And so we'll just have to figure it out when a disappearance happens that lasts longer than a week. To me, that's not good enough. You're responsible for everything. You really are. And so you have to be prepared. I'm not saying that anybody in law enforcement needs a whole semester, although I think at the college level that would certainly be helpful. But once you get to be investigator, I'm not saying that a person need to take several months off of his or her career to be educated on disappearances. Not at all. I think I could do it in a week. I think I could teach these people in a week. But going back to our prior question, they're not really looking for people like me. So the answer the question is 0. And this is the reason that what they do, as all of you have seen, well, if a disappearance happens, we'll give it to this homicide investigator over here. We'll give it to this person who does vice over here. The problem is nothing that those people have learned in any of those disciplines, homicide, vice, car theft, robbery, none of that's going to help them with missing persons cases. 0. 0. And so that's why we end up talking about, well, why did the police not seem to know what to do after a few days? Well, this is the reason. So the answer is 0. It's very sad. Trying to change it. Don't think it's going to happen tomorrow. But if we're going to make a dent in the number of unsolved missing persons cases in the United States, it's gonna have to change. Because I think the public, if they were more aware of the numbers, this would change. But the public isn't, except for all of you, because the public doesn't take an interest. And, a lot of people don't take an interest in disappearances until it happens to someone in their family. And I think that we have to have a higher level of consciousness. Is that the word? Higher level. Our consciences have to be a little more refined regarding this. We can't just be concerned about what happens to us. What about other things happening to other people? That's when it will change. Next question. I was curious if you could discuss episodes where the outcome was different from what you expected and how lessons learned can be applied to old and new unsolved cases. Spectacular question. I hope all of you know by now that I don't mind admitting when I was wrong regarding the outcome of a disappearance. Having said that, you should know that my correct rate is up above 90%. But yes, I have gotten some wrong, and I'll tell you about a couple of them. And I don't think anybody should be surprised that these are disappearances that were featured very early on in Unfound's existence, whereas the ones, even the ones, maybe except for Bo Man from last year, and Brandon Roberts too, pretty much I have as it has gone on from 2017 to 2018 to 2019, 2020, etc., I've gotten more and more of them right. And I'd like to think that I'm continuing to learn, but I still realize there are going to be a few where I get them wrong. But the ones that come to mind that I got wrong, Crystal Morrison, once again going way back to, I featured that disappearance way back in 2017. I actually thought that she was murdered. I thought that she had called to get picked up, but maybe she called her former drug dealer to come bring her drugs, and I thought she might have done something out in the parking lot, and she overdosed, and then that guy covered it up. We now know that's not what happened. We now know she went down the street. Something was going on. It was a combination of being sick, the temperature outside, being severely underweight due to her prior addiction. Maybe she did fall back into her addiction. And then we know that she was found not too far from that Shell station, and nobody, including her family, believes that it was foul play. So I got that one wrong. Another one I got wrong was Esther Westenbarger. I surely thought that her brother, who is a shady guy to this day, was involved in her disappearance. Instead, we now know that probably she was drinking and driving, and that she was on the wrong road, went through that stop sign, went right into that retention pond, and drowned in her car. And it took 10 years to figure that out. Now, what I will tell you now, though, had we covered if those disappearances had not gotten solved, and they both got solved in, 2019, the way I remember it, very close to each other, coincidentally. I think if those disappearances had not been solved, and they were still eligible to be covered on Unfound now, that there would be no doubt in my mind that I would pick, you know what, I think Crystal Morrison walked off. She was seen down at that Shell station, and then something happened. She walked off. I know that wouldn't be a very satisfying resolution or theory that I would have for many of you, but we now know, all these years later, how often that happens. The people who have an addiction or had an addiction or were sick, they do walk off. And they do die out in the middle of nowhere, and there isn't foul play. That was not something that was fully didn't appreciate how often it happens when I started Unfound back in 2016. Now, of course, with Esther Westenbarger, what has changed since the covering her disappearance to now, of course, is now all these YouTube channels that go out there, and with scuba divers, they go out and look for cars in bodies of water. And I think that certainly, this is where I would go. Had we covered Esther Westenbarger's unsolved disappearance last year, if it was still unsolved in 2023, I certainly would have come to the decision of, I think she's in her car somewhere in a body of water, and it very well may be that I might have actually picked out that retention pond on a map. But back then, it certainly seemed, given that her brother's so shady, and being that she was with him that night, you know, did he steal her car because he was jealous that she was retired and she had this money and everything? We now know none of that was true. And this is, I think, should be a lesson for many of you who maybe too quickly default to the foul play angle. We have to remember, according to my stats, along with a couple listeners who I've had look at the really educated listeners from the think tank, between 60 and 65% of Unfound's disappearances are foul play. And that sounds like a lot, and I guess it is, 2/3. But that also means that 35% of them aren't foul play. And so we've covered 320-some disappearances. Let's just make it 300. That means that 100 of the disappearances, at least, that Unfound has covered are not foul play. It's a considerable number. Just strange to me how quickly sometimes, though, people want to default to foul play. But we're all learning here, and I think had Esther and her car not been found and we'd gotten to and had her daughter on as a guest, that I would have said, you know what, she's in her car and she's in a body of water somewhere. And it very well may be before Unfound ever got to cover it. It very well could be that one of those diving companies would have found out about Esther's disappearance, and they would have started looking around a body of water and gone into that retention pond and found her. Very possible. Very, very possible. So those are a couple outcomes that I got wrong. Brandon Roberts from last year got it wrong. That's one of those where I don't know how you get it right. When somebody else ends up with his phone, the odds of that person being alive are very, very, very slim. He was alive. And then Bo Man, I certainly believed that he was deceased. Certainly didn't think that it was foul play. Could be open to the idea that he overdosed, but not because of Joanna Good or anything. But I don't think anybody could have suspected that he would be found a quarter mile away, just lying out, not necessarily in the open, but he was certainly outside on pavement in this little courtyard of this abandoned building. Nobody could have predicted that. On top of the fact that all of his friends and family had gone down there, around there looking for him. So I thought he was deceased. Certainly drugs were prominent in my mind. Just could not have predicted the location, though. In contrast to Daniel Villarreal, kind of the same thing. I thought that he ran off and was deceased somewhere, but I don't know how you predict that he ends up in somebody's backyard in a little outhouse or whatever it was. I don't know how you'd ever predict that. There's just going to be things that are so rare that there's no experience or statistics that can be used to predict that, really, really specifically. We may think that, oh yeah, the person's dead or the person overdosed or something, but trying to narrow down, well, where that person is, and then the person ends up in some place that's really odd. I don't know how you do that. I don't think we'll ever be able to do that. unless people start getting GPS implanted into their brains or something. But I'm still open to the idea that there are many disappearances that we've featured on Unfound that are like that aren't foul play, that people who have journeyed off, walked off, ran off, and they just ended up in places that people wouldn't search, or people don't have access to that area. I'm certainly open to that idea, for example, with Jason Landry's disappearance. So I hope that whoever asked this question, I hope that answers, that is the answer you were looking for. Certainly have gotten some wrong, but man, it makes me feel good that I get a lot of them right. Next question. This is interesting, being that I just came back from a 2-day RV trip with my brother Brian. Are you like your siblings at all, or are you all different? Oh boy, being that I have to, even like I said, I don't know if they never bring it up, so I take for granted that my siblings, my 2 brothers and my sister, don't listen to my podcast. Once again, not offended by that at all. All right? If they were doing some TV show or a podcast, I don't know if I would be listening to them either. Of course, it might just depend on what the topic is, what they're doing. Maybe. Am I like my siblings? It's interesting to me, for some of you, maybe, well, that's kind of a weird question. Or, for all of you who don't know, I have 3 full biological siblings. We all have the same mother and father. However, I was given up for adoption. They were not. And they're all quite a bit older than me, like 20 years, just on the average 20 years older than I am. I was a little bit of a mistake, and hence the reason I was given up for adoption. And then I was raised as an only child by myself, completely spoiled by Ed and Loretta Dentzel. And then I got to meet my biological family. It's like 30 years now. It was April of 1994. We were all spring chickens. It was fantastic. So, and I've known them since. I've hung out with all of them for extended periods of time. I've gone on vacations with my sister Diane and her husband, her son and his kids. I've gone on trips with my brother Brian back when I lived in Las Vegas, and he would go through as a truck driver. I've hung out quite a bit with my brother Michael. For example, before he lives in the Pittsburgh area, I hung up quite a bit with him before I moved to Las Vegas. So I've experienced being around all of them for extended periods of time. And it's interesting, what you find out is genetic, and what you find out is environmental. I think it's safe to say that my biological parents, John and Suzanne, very different from Ed and Loretta Dentzel. And doesn't mean any of them bad or great or anything else, just different. Different personalities, different the way they looked at life, different choices that they made in their lives, and everything else. And that certainly shows, I think. But some of the things that you would not think that are genetic, but it's all of us have a lot of the same mannerisms. We kind of walk the same way. We stand kind of the same way. We talk the same way. I would say one of the big things, though, if I may say, one of the big differences, I think, between my siblings and me, even though you may say, well, Ed, you're a heck of a talker. You can talk for 2 hours on that live show and everything else. But if you were to meet me in public, I'm really not much of a talker. But I think I'm very much a listener. I think that's what allows me to do these interviews, which is a question coming up here. Whereas my brothers and my sister are talkers. They love to talk. They know how to talk, and they're all educated, well spoken, great English and everything else. And that's another one of the things is that all of us pretty sharp. There's a reason, for example, that the trivia team that I'm on with my brother Brian, we do so well. Now, we have a lot of other smart people on the team, surely, but there's a lot of information bouncing around in my brain and my brother Brian's brain that we can access. A lot of different experiences and all the reading that we've done. And that's another part that even though I'm not one, and maybe this is the other big difference, my 3 siblings are voracious readers. They read a lot of books and novels. They've read way more like fiction novels than I ever will. And they listen to audiobooks way more than I ever will. So they're very well read. So it all makes us all pretty sharp brains. And in fact, I will tell you that even my dad has said, and I love my parents. Parents, obviously, smart people too. But my dad has said more than once over the years that, you certainly got those, the Joyce brains. He doesn't know what kind of brains had I gotten. He just, of course, is kind of joking around what kind of brains I would have gotten if I were my parents' biological child of Ed and Loretta Denzel. Like I said, they're both very educated. Both were teachers. Mother was an excellent musician. Dad, very smart. He's in 87. He just kicks butt on crossword puzzles like no 87. I'm sure you're old out there. But we do talk about that. So regarding my siblings, I would also say that if I can talk about my brothers for a minute, maybe my sister too. No, my brothers, my sister's I think much more like I am, a little more introverted. And whereas my brothers, social animals. They love getting together with a big crowd. They love getting together with guys that they went to college with, guys that they went to high school with, and going on the meeting guy trips and things like that. I'm not like that, and I would not say that my sister Diane is like that either. I'm a very private person. I don't mind being by myself for extended periods of time. When I do get together with my friends, it's usually just one-on-one or just a couple people. So in that way, I'm very much more like my sister, whereas my brothers, social animals. If there's a party going on, they probably want to be at it, not me. And is that environmental or genetic? I don't know. So a lot of similarities, a lot of differences, and it's truly a reflection on being raised by different people, having different life experiences, maybe being pushed or led in certain directions by parents, or not led by parents, whatever choice you want to pick there, that has certainly made us all different people. And even if I could assess my 3 siblings, they're all very different people. Certainly. I see them as 3 very distinct individuals. Even though my brother Brian may be similar to my sister Diane in some ways, similar to my brother Michael, but they have a lot of differences. They're surely 3 distinct people, and I think that if someone were to meet all 4 of us at one time, and each of us got equal time to display our personalities and likes and dislikes and everything, I think it would show that we're all 4 very distinct people, even though we share a lot of the same qualities as well. But certainly anybody wants to do a sociology experiment or study, myself and my 3 siblings would be a spectacular study, given that they were raised by different parents, I had different parents, and then we all ended up meeting 25 years later. Certainly I think would be interesting if somebody wanted to do that. Next question. Do you write out your notes for the interviews and the podcast, or do you type them on a computer? I'm a huge computer person. Back, of course, well before I ever started Unfound or ever did any podcasting, way back in the 90s when I really started doing some writing, like fiction writing, and this really is something I started in high school, and had an English class where I had to write some short stories, and I always did very well with that. And then I had to do quite a bit of writing in college, and always on any writing assignments, always got graded very, very well. Did not do very well in school, but if there were any writing assignments having to do a study or something like that, like I remember I had a constitutional law class where I had to
research specific. They actually gave you the Supreme Court justice that you had to look up and go to the before the internet, had to go to the library and look up. And I did well on that. And so I always did well at writing. But I will tell you that never did I actually ever write anything by hand. First of all, I have horrible handwriting. If any of you have ever seen my signature, that is about as good as my writing gets, and that is horrible. I don't know why that is, but my writing is not good. In fact, when I do crossword puzzles with my dad, he tells me, well, make sure you keep it within the squares and make sure I can understand what the letters are. And he's kind of joking around, but he's kind of telling me the truth. My dad has spectacular handwriting. I have horrible handwriting. So I would never write anything out by hand. But you should know, if all of you don't know this, even to this day, there are many famous authors who write by hand, like with a pencil or pen and pad. They don't sit at a computer and type, which boggles my mind. I cannot imagine doing that. Writing, of course, a novel is going to be, 100,000 words or something? But to do the first draft by hand, forget it. Just absolutely forget it. I wouldn't even be able to read my own handwriting. It would just take too long and everything. So when it comes to Unfound, everything's done on computer. It's not even a consideration otherwise. All the notes. And what I do is, how I do this is when I talk to a future guest for the first time, I get permission to record the conversation. And then after I listen to the entire conversation again as it plays, I'm sitting at my computer typing out notes, ideas that come to my mind, maybe things that I think are missed or facts that just aren't clear to me, to do follow-up questions, etc. And then eventually all of that turns into an outline that once again I type out, that I send to the guest, and that person looks it over. So we all have an understanding of how the conversation is going to go and everything that we're going to cover. I could never do any of that, writing it out with a pen and paper. That would just, oh my gosh, can't even imagine it. So I am fully locked into electronics here, and that is never going to change ever. Never, ever. So, and that's why I have, you have to keep in mind, I guess technically I use 4 different computers to do this podcast. I have my HP, which is where I do all of my writing and everything. I have my MacBook, which is where I do all of my recording in GarageBand, if you're familiar with that program. And then I have my tablet, which is what I use to record some of the conversations. And then of course, I have my phone. So I'm locked in to technology for this podcast. Next question. Do you play video games? And if so, which ones do you play? The only video game that I play these days is chess on my phone. Never been a big video game person. I had, going back to 1981, 82, 83, I had an Atari 2600. And I can remember having sleepovers at my house. Boys, friends of mine would come over, and they'd bring their Atari cassettes, video games, and would play, late into the night before my mom forced us all to go to bed. I can remember that. But really I got away from it, and the only time I would play any video games is when I would go over to my best friend's house, and they were all brothers, and they had Nintendo, late 80s, and I'd play Super Mario Brothers and maybe a couple other games. They were all into that. But once again, only when I was over there. And then I got a computer, must have been around 2000 or something, that had the video game Descent on it. It was like a first-person shooter, but you were in this little spaceship or something. Maybe some of you remember that. And I can remember playing that on my computer. And then there was that video game that a lot of guys at Star Trek were into. It was called Unreal Tournament, where you had these little, once again, kind of first-person shooter, but you were in the maps were
you were like a little person, but you were like in a kitchen or something, but you're just really, really little. And so you could like jump down into the drain of the kitchen or the sink or whatever. Or you were like in an arcade room or a billiards room and you could go inside the billiards table, stuff like that. And I played that for a while and was kind of into that because some of my friends at Star Trek were into it. But really since then, that's been it. I think it's no different than with doing Unfound. Like I love puzzles. I can remember as a kid, we had my parents had a subscription to the magazine Games. Do you remember that? I don't even know if it still exists. But I loved that magazine. We'd get it, and of course there was a lot of stuff in there. It was just so difficult. But I loved it. Loved it. And I still do love like word games and puzzles like that. And even if you've ever taken the LSAT to get into law school, that's really what it is. It's a minimum information game. It's like, all right, 5 people are sat around a table, but this person doesn't sit next to this person, and this person has blonde hair and red hair, and you have to figure out how they're all seated around this table and who has the correct colored hair. That's what the LSAT is like. I love stuff like that. But doing Unfound, I get to do real-life puzzles. And that's what I mean. I'm much more of a reality, although I don't watch reality TV. I'm much more of living out here, trying to solve the puzzles and mysteries that actually exist out here in the world, in contrast to solving any on a website or in a magazine or something. And so I think that's the reason that I'm not into video games, that I go play disc golf in real life. I don't play disc golf on a computer. I think that's just the reason. It just doesn't have any meaning to me. It's not real. If you mess up, you can just hit reset. It just is not really a challenge to me. And the other thing is, I think a lot of people get into it because of the camaraderie. Of course, you can do that over the internet, make friends and everything. And like I said, I'm kind of a lone wolf out here. So that figures into it as well. So not a big video game guy. I don't really necessarily have anything bad to say about them. But I would also say that I'm not sure overall. I think it's probably a net positive for society video games, but I wouldn't say it's a net positive as much as video game people think. How about that? Next question. Like I said, I'm trying to mix these up between like true crime stuff and non-true crime stuff, going back and forth. Did I ever get COVID? I have no idea. It's been over 4 years since that all started, and I've never been tested. I have gotten sick twice. That one time, if you'll remember, back in December when I was up seeing my dad for Christmas, I mean, that was the sickest I've been in a long time. In fact, to the point that I couldn't even record an episode for that Friday, which was the first time I ever missed an episode because I was sick. Just could not. No energy, voice shot, everything else. Was that COVID? No idea. More recently, once again, when I went to see my dad here in March of 2024, that last few days that I was there, got sick again. Certainly not as bad as at Christmas time, but it was no fun. But still, I was able to get the episode recorded. Were either of those COVID? I don't know. All I know is those are the only 2 times in the last 4 years that I've been sick. I'm generally a person who doesn't get sick. And in fact, if you just want to count Florida, I really haven't been sick at all since I moved here in 2011. Now, I've been sick outside of Florida, in Pennsylvania twice. But as far as being sick in Florida, like with any coughing and sore throat and headaches and things like that, I certainly have my allergies, which come in February into March. But actual illness, virus, bacteria, or whatever, I haven't been sick in Florida since I moved here. So I maybe one of those sicknesses I had at just the recent one or the one back in December was COVID. I have no idea. Or maybe I got COVID here in Florida and I didn't even know it, which I've heard is possible. So I just don't know. And I have to admit, unless somebody brings up COVID to me, I'm going to be totally honest with you. I know this is bizarre. I kind of forget that it ever happened. It just didn't affect me, given I'm a podcaster, I work from home and everything anyway. You go back to that time of March 2020 for the rest of like 2020, still got episodes done. Didn't affect my work at all, so maybe eventually it was just easier for me to put the whole thing out of my mind than many of you who were greatly, greatly affected by it. But unless I actually read COVID somewhere, or somebody asks me a question like this, or somebody mentions it, I have to admit there's a large part of me that forgot that it ever happened. Next question. Your ability to lead the interviews in a direct yet courteous way truly amazes me. Thank you. Have you ever had an argument or ended up on bad terms with any guest or potential guest? The answer is yes. Of course, I'm not going to mention any names. First of all, potential guests, yes. Usually, and this is these are actually, when you say argument, there are people who have stood me up, and that's a whole other topic. That's maybe a little different, but actually disagreements, it happens. And really, usually the reason is that there are things that, you have to understand this. We don't talk about anything in the interviews that the guest doesn't want to discuss. The issue, though, happens is when they want to leave things out that I determine must be talked about, like fundamental facts, something that is just unavoidable. Not only that, but it's actually out there in the public. Where if we don't talk about it, then everybody's going to come away from the episode thinking, why didn't they discuss that? And I don't ever want that to happen. Unless it's something like Kookville Conspiracy Land or something like that. But this example that I always give, but there are others, but this is the one that kind of is like the stereotype, is that a guy went missing. He was working for the military. And allegedly, right before he went missing, he had discovered there was some accounting problem in his department in the military. And the family was thinking, well, there was some sort of cover up, and he discovered something, and then the federal government or somebody, the men in the black suits caused his disappearance. Now you know me, how much I'm going to buy into something like that. Not much. However, I was willing to talk about it. We could certainly have a discussion about it, but what I wanted to talk about, though, was the fact that this guy, though, on the other hand, was cheating on his wife and was last seen with his wife's brother. Now, you can certainly understand why I would want to talk about that, because that sounds to me like a bigger reason that this guy, who is still missing to this day, by the way, I think 30 years later, than the government, getting rid of him because of something he allegedly found, an accounting problem. And the thing is, we have to think, the budget for the federal government, I know we're in deficits and everything, but the budget for the federal government's like $5 trillion, and we were talking like a couple $1 million here. Once again, allegedly. The problem was all they wanted to do was talk about the government angle, and they didn't want to talk about the fact that this guy was cheating on his wife and was last seen with his wife's brother. Now, you could see why that wouldn't go well. That I would have to say, well, I just can't do that. This is kind of usually what causes myself and a potential guest to come to an impasse. Where it's, the unstoppable force meets the immovable object. They don't want to talk about it. I insist we must talk about it because it, but it'll make me and the podcast, I think, in a way, lose some credibility. And so we can't do it. And we have a disagreement, and that's that. Now, before I move on to talking about maybe a couple guests, once again, no names, where we kind of eventually had a falling out, I will talk about people who are scheduled to do interviews and then just kind of disappear, don't take calls, and don't return texts. That happens to both me and my assistant, Emily, who does a lot of the reaching out to people for Unfound. You would be amazed how much that happens. We just had it recently where a woman who was it, her brother went missing. She ended up sending Emily all sorts of pictures and wrote this long dissertation about what happened and seemed energetic. And then both me and Emily tried to message her and text her over the next few days. Nothing. And that was like a month ago. Why do these things happen? I don't know. Why do I go through talking to some few potential guests, have this great rapport, and then on the day of the interview, boom, nothing. No call, no text, never talk to him again. I don't know. And then I will try to follow up like a month later. Hey, what happened? Won't get back to me. I have no idea what's going on. If I knew, I would tell you, but I don't. Maybe, I suppose there's a lot of different reasons that could happen, but I couldn't ever even pick out one good reason for that. So that happens regarding potential guests as well. Doing a lot of work, and then boom, nothing. It's like we never talked. And no, it's rude. It is rude, rude, rude. And if you don't know me very well, I can put up with a lot of things, but I am not rude. I don't stand people up. You know, if I'm supposed to call somebody at a certain time, I call them. I do not waste people's time. People are never sitting around waiting for Ed Densel to come through with a promise that he made. I will come through with it when I say I will. It is amazing, though, how many rude people. It's one of those things, you know what? Bad things happen to rude people, I guess, too. Now, as far as people who have actually been on Unfound and then we later had a falling out, it happens. Mainly because of them getting wrapped up with new people. Remember, me, I move on to the next disappearance. I'm always ready to talk to all of the guests who have been on Unfound, but this is what I do. I move on to the next disappearance. That doesn't mean the other 300 behind me don't mean anything to me. They absolutely mean everything to me. But this is what I do. But what happens is that some of these guests get wrapped up with new people. And these people start talking in their ear, giving them these people who really, in my opinion, because I kind of, in one way or another, find out who these people are somehow, because this is what I do. I'm in this business. You know, I think these new people get in these guests' ear. Oh, you should know. That guy doesn't know what he's saying. This is actually what happened. No, that didn't happen. He doesn't know what he's talking about. No, this was definitely a murder, and we're going to prove it for you and everything else. And meanwhile, I'm thinking that's probably not what happened. And they're thinking, well, this is the person who's dealing with me all the time now, but Ed's moved on to all these other disappearances, so what does he care? So I have to start listening to this new person. And then it gets to the point where, you know, because I'm always honest with my guests, which, of course, sometimes can get you in trouble. And I just have to say, I don't think that person knows what he or she is talking about. And then the problems start. Because the problem we have is there are too many people out there who are more than happy to tell a family whatever they want to hear. Oh, you believe that your son or daughter was murdered? Oh, we believe that too. Oh, you believe there was some huge conspiracy? Oh, we believe that too. We're going to prove it to you. And we and our human egos and everything, what do we much like to do? We're much more likely to go along with people who agree with us than disagree with us. But the problem is, just because somebody agrees with us doesn't mean we or they are correct. And so that's usually what happens. There's usually some sort of wedge that is driven between myself and a prior guest. It hasn't happened a lot, but it has happened to the point where, in fact, one prior guest said that
she said she just wished that I would get rid of all of the information I ever collected on the disappearance in which she appeared as a guest. That actually happened. Just get rid of it. You know, we're dealing with somebody new now. Okay, good luck with that. So that happened. So I'm not saying I'm a perfect person or anything, but it's easy, I think, for maybe some guests to maybe eventually not like me because I don't tell them what they want to hear. Now, I certainly could be wrong. Certainly. The problem is that these new people that are now in my former guest life, they insist that they're so dang correct. That's the problem. When really, you know, there's not really anybody who can come in and absolutely say 100% that something happened. Moreover, they could say this, but I don't know how they're going, you know, the couple that I'm thinking about, and I don't want to mention any names, I have no idea how they're going to prove that. Despite them saying that they can. I don't know how they're going to do that. So, a lot of, are these actual people con people? Some of them are. Surely. And I do what I can, but I can't save everybody. So that's how that all happens. Next question. Do you think that the true crime fans all over America and the world are helping or hurting cases being solved? I would say they aren't helping enough. Certainly true crime, people who take an interest in disappearances and unsolved murders and anything like those topics. Millions and millions of people, not just in the United States, all over the world. The problem we have is that not enough people are getting engaged, are getting actually involved. They're certainly willing to tune in. I thank all of you who tune in to Unfound every Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern. But I wish you would tune in and also get involved. Find out what's going on. Any searches popping up. You know, reaching out to a family near you, saying, do you need somebody to do something? You know, I've been listening to this podcast. I think I'm learning a few things about disappearances. Is there a way I can help? There are not enough people doing that. Until that starts happening on a greater basis, I think that true crime and the way people outside of it look at it is always going to be a bit negative. You almost, not every week maybe, but every month you can see at least one article written somewhere about saying that people who take an interest in all of this stuff, they're not helping, they're trivializing people's pain, they're getting entertainment out of people's pain and people's loss and everything. And certainly there are many productions that do that. That's why I continue to say that Unfound is a news program. It's not an entertainment one. I'm here to inform. The guests are here to inform. We're not here to entertain you. We're here to give you information that hopefully you will act upon yourself. Now, I realize all of you have your own things going on in your lives. I get it. But 1 hour a month, is that too much to ask? So until that starts happening, there will be a perception that this is just something that's being done for the purpose of money. Do I get paid to do this? Yes, but certainly, given my experience in a whole bunch of different areas and my intelligence and everything else, I could certainly be making way more money doing a lot of other things. Truth be known. So, I'm certainly not doing it for the money. Although I appreciate all the people who support through Patreon and the advertisers and everybody else. But I think this is also a reason, going back to a question from the first, 30 minutes or something, about the police. law enforcement. Law enforcement obviously needs help regarding disappearances. How do I know? Because there's like 100,000 unsolved disappearances in the United States. You'd think they might look out there amongst the population and say, is there anybody who we think can help outside of our ranks here? And what's funny is that in Texas, they're actually going to be having some program through the Attorney General's office where they're actually going to allow college kids to look at the crime files of like murders and disappearances, cold cases. Myself and many other podcasters who take these topics very seriously, we file FOIAs. We can't get our hands on information, but the Texas Attorney General will be more than happy to let a bunch of uneducated, inexperienced college kids look at them. I don't know if that would be happening if the true crime genre and everybody involved in it had a better reputation. So, do you think? I think we're helping a little bit, but certainly we have the ability to help a lot more, and that a lot of people don't, and they just listen or watch, and then they're on with their day until the next Friday or whatever else, I think hurts the overall reputation of the true crime community. There you go. Question: what celebrity would you cast in your biopic to play yourself? Now, this was a question that was posted in the discussion group, and already your people were picking out Jason Bateman. And the reason is that there's a story that goes back, I'm going to guess this was 2013, that I showed up at a disc golf tournament in Orlando, Florida. And there was a player who then got a couple other disc golf players involved, and they thought that I was Jason Bateman. They thought that Jason Bateman, the actor, of course, going way back, what was the second Teen Wolf 2 Money movie, and whatever else he was in. And then, of course, more recently, Ozark, which is a show I've never seen. And, of course, he was in that movie, Game Night, which is a fantastic movie. Love that movie. Fantastic. Jason Bateman, there are a lot of people who, at least when I had short hair, thought he and I look alike. And I guess I see the resemblance. I would say our noses are of course, he has much straighter teeth than I do. Maybe I'll get that fixed one of these days. But our noses are very different. But other than that, I guess we kind of look alike, at least when I have short hair, which isn't going to be again anytime soon. So that's like the easy answer, but you can never cast him because he and I are like the same age. And if we're really going to do a biopic, are we going to go back? I don't know. I mean, how far do you want to go back to do the story of Ed Densel? Jason Bateman's probably not going to be able to play a young Ed Densel. I'm taking this question, but I can't answer it because I really don't know a lot of young actors. I'm certainly a prisoner of my generation, Generation X, and movies and TV shows. I haven't seen a lot of the Academy Award-winning movies that have come out in the last few years or anything. So if we're really going to go back, let's just say even to when I was just 30, like when I got to Las Vegas when I would have been, 27. What's a 27 to 30-some, early 30-something-year-old actor who could play me? Maybe that guy who played Spider-Man or something, but he's Australian. I'd like an American. Or is he British? I'd like an American guy to play me. I don't want somebody just faking an American accent. I would expect some real American actor to play me. But I just can't pick that person out because I just am so out of touch with, Generation Z or millennials or any sort of people who are capable actors in that generation. But certainly, have this been 25 years ago, or something, then maybe I think Jason Bateman could have played me, and that would have been kind of cool, I guess, but not now. Certainly not now, but it's a fantastic question. You should know that there are particular actors and actresses who I like, but you won't be surprised that it's a factor of my age. And Robert Downey Jr., fantastic. Even was a fan of him, even going back to back to the 80s with Weird Science and with Less Than Zero and The Pickup Artist. And of course he had problems in the 90s, but I think his story about coming back, cleaning himself up, and being such a spectacular person and husband and father and leader, and just seems to really have this great moral compass and everything. Fantastic. Everybody knows that I'm a huge fan of Bo Derek and Jennifer Aniston, but once again, these are all of Keanu Reeves, all a factor of my age. And so really can't pick somebody out who could be in a biopic of me going back so many years, then leading up to the present or wherever my future is going. But it's a fantastic question. I promise to think about it a little bit more. Maybe I'll have a better answer later this year. Next question. Would you ever consider becoming a private detective in order to expand and gather more resources for Unfound? I have to admit, I'm not convinced anything like that would help. All of you by now know my attitude toward private investigators. Very negative attitude. Negative. Certainly, if you want a cheating husband or wife followed, probably a private detective is a good choice. But if you're actually looking for them to gain any more insight into a disappearance and collect more facts, true facts regarding a disappearance, the odds of that happening are very, very low. And I don't care if it's a disappearance that happened a month ago or a year ago or 10 years ago. I don't think it matters. This is no different than what I say just about public detectives, investigators, actually people who are actually in law enforcement who carry guns and can arrest people and handcuff people. Just don't have the experience. They don't have that, what I talk about the Rolodex. Me doing this podcast, I have a Rolodex of disappearances in my mind. All of the ones that are featured on Unfound. Now, granted, I may lose, because of the human mind, I may lose a few details here and there, but I have a general idea about disappearances and why they happen. And the statements that families make, the statements that suspects make, and about what witnesses, how witnesses say, how witnesses act, and what they say, and circumstances, and all of these other things. What's up in my head is not in any investigator's mind in the United States at all. Zero. They have nothing to tap into in their mind when they show up to fill out the paperwork for a missing persons case. Same way with private detectives. Same thing. They got nothing. It's like what, a 21st century cliche or gotten into the lexicon lingo or whatever. I got nothing. That's the way they are. Of course, they're not going to say that because they want to get paid. The other issue I have is that I look at, if you're going to be a private detective, then there should be some sort of guarantee. I look at it no different than a plumber. If you have a problem with your sink, you call the plumber, and the plumber shows up and doesn't fix it, the plumber doesn't get paid. Doesn't get paid. The plumber is getting paid to fix the problem. The plumber is not getting paid. I realize that, well, just for me to show up, it's $150 an hour. Well, yeah, good luck trying to cash that in if you can't fix it. I'll cancel that credit card charge in a second. I give you a check, I'll cancel that check if you can't fix it and you're just going to leave. You wouldn't pay a plumber if the person just shows up, can't fix it. So for private investigators, though, what?
They want paid no matter if they bring anything to a conclusion or not. And so this is one of those, I don't know if it's certainly not a legal thing. I don't know if it's a moral thing, but it's certainly an ethical thing. Is it right to get paid and not fix something? This is different than a police investigator, because a police investigator is going to get paid no matter if a disappearance happens or not. They're salaried. So I also think about that I have a problem with that. There's nothing in my experience that tells me you need to be a private investigator to do these sort of things. In fact, it seems like it's a detriment. It's just my perception. Certainly, I'm not saying that there shouldn't be private detectives. Like I said, there are probably many things that you could use them for. You're not going to get the police to follow a cheating husband around. You're not. In addition, it's probably not healthy if you're a wife and you think your husband's cheating on you to hire your brother to do it, because who knows might happen there. Somebody might end up getting murdered or something. So I can understand wanting a third party to do it. It makes all the sense in the world to me. But they have experience in that, and my guess is these people are going to get what they paid for. They're looking for evidence. They're looking for pictures and anything like that of the cheating husband with the stripper at the pay-by-the-hour motel. Private detectives are really, really good at that. For disappearances, which are way more complicated, it's just so the answer is no. And even on top of that, of course, there are states where you don't need any criteria to become a private detective. Zero. You just go out and fill up some paperwork. Boom, you're a private detective. Congratulations. Here in Florida, it's actually fairly complicated to become a private detective. Either way, I really don't think it matters. None of it has anything to do with missing persons cases or knowing anything about missing persons cases, me being a private detective, like it says here, gather more resources. Would it be easier for me to get police files on disappearances? I don't think there's any guarantee of that. In addition, we've covered some disappearances where private investigators were involved, and I actually got to see the work that the private investigator did. Here's for all of you. Private detectives are just as likely to get caught up in all these crazy, complex conspiratorial hoaxes as the general public is. That's what I've seen in the paperwork that I've seen that has been given to me. So certainly we need more great people being private detectives, but for me personally and what I do, I don't think it would help at all. If you actually want to help people with those things that they can't do themselves, like cheating spouses and whatever other things private detectives could do, kind of investigations that the police aren't going to do, but it might be dangerous for private people to do, or just regular family members or some just lay person, then I get it. But for what I do, I just don't see it as being helpful. Next question. What is your happiest memory? Well, I've already answered about Star Trek and earlier about Vegas and happiest memory. But from that time, and certainly that's a big one. But what makes your happiest memory in your entire life, what makes it a little difficult to answer this question is because it's difficult because, of course, I've never been married. And, of course, any guy who would be married, whether you're straight or gay or whatever, is obligated with the potential problem of a severe penalty if you don't answer this way. Well, the day I got married, of course. Or the day I met my future spouse or something along those lines. I, of course, have no story like that. In addition, parents might say, well, the day my kids were born or my son was born or my daughter was born. Well, I don't have any kids either. So it's a little more difficult for a person in my position to come up with happiest specific memory, because I don't have anything like that. And I'm not obligated to anybody to say anything in particular, which once again, with the prospect of there being a penalty if I don't. The way I would break it down is I have a lot of happy specific memories, and most of them, I will be honest with you, have to do with me accomplishing something. Maybe going, I don't want to sound like Al Bundy from Married with Children here, but I didn't play football. But going back to high school sports, I was a pretty good high school pitcher, won some pretty big games and pitched really well. Very happy memories that I can rely on there. I won, because I was a great piano player at one time, I won the freshman talent show at where I went to school, Grove City College, my freshman year. I also won the overall. In my freshman year, they had a talent show in the spring for the entire school, which was like 2,200 kids. I won that too. Yeah, like I said, I was pretty good at one time, thanks to my mother. So there's that. So winning things, winning trivia is a happy memory. I was a drag racer, won some races there. Anything that, like I said, once again, having to keep this PG, anything having to do with winning is always going to stick out. I'm a very competitive guy. And maybe that's, even when it comes to Unfound, sometimes I do feel it's me against the mystery. Me versus the mystery. Me versus the disappearance. Me versus that suspect who probably got away with murder. Me versus. And of course, at least to this point, I've lost quite a bit. But that doesn't keep me from, not trying to win every week. And of course, I know all of you are part of it. We're all in this together, and we're all on the same team. But that's generally how I think of it, and that's how I think about covering these disappearances. It's me against whatever happened. So winning is a big time memory. Anything having to do with that, baseball, trivia, drag racing, anything like that. And then also a very happy memory is when I got to meet my biological family for the first time in 1994. That was just this totally bizarre thing that I could not have guessed would ever happen. And once again, going back to Star Trek, making all those friends and keeping a lot of those friends, and some of those people becoming very, very special to me to this day. So a lot of that. There's no doubt that I've had a lot of success in my life, a lot of goals reached, but on the other hand, I've failed quite a bit as well. Of course, if you're going to ask me what the saddest memory is, it's of course my mother dying on November 28th, 2018. There's not even any competition for that. But I've failed. I can't even tell you how many things that I've tried and failed and beat myself up over that and everything. So I had a lot of great memories, but there are a lot of bad ones. Maybe my bad ones don't, except for my mother dying, nothing compared to what other people have experienced. Of course, a lot of people by the time they're 53 have had cancer and survived, and maybe they've lost a lot more people in their lives, way more than just their mother and everything. I get that. So a lot of fond memories, but a lot of memories, bad memories, mostly of me trying to do things and failing and everything else. So that's about, I just can't pick out one. Well, I could pick out one happiest memory, but like I said, we're keeping this PG. Next question. Ed, what do you think about there being so many kids that have gone missing lately, and some of them have been found murdered? Some of them are still missing, and it is so sad to me. I have to admit, I don't know if this is statistically true or not. This is, you have to remember, I am part of the media. I am a reporter. Yes, the podcasting is the medium. That is the technology. But really, I'm a reporter. I find people to talk to. Emily finds people to talk to. Sheree finds people to talk to. Other people out there find me people to talk to. But I'm a reporter, and I can be very, very critical of my own profession. I hate the American media. Hate it. Hate it, hate it, hate it. I think it's horrible. All of it. Politics, sports, entertainment, anything. Pretty much hate all of it. What is expected, like all of the regular stuff. I'm not saying there isn't some person doing, an individual here or there doing a fine job, but just overall, I think it's certainly devolved into an environment of cynicism and sensationalism and kookism on all of it. Like I said, I'm not here to take sides in politics or sports or anything else. I think it's all horrible. So when you ask me about, there are the reports about kids, I don't know if that's true or not. Is it statistically true that more kids have gone missing lately? Just because it's being reported more doesn't mean that's a fact. So I can't answer that without knowing if it's factually true. And I really don't know how, if it's just recent stuff, I don't even know how I would go about comparing that to a year ago or 5 years ago or 10 years ago or something like that. Or more of them are being found murdered. This person asked the question, this is that person's perception, but that doesn't make it true. And I have to be doubtful because I know just within what I know about disappearances, I know how everything gets skewed. This is my work. I don't just report on this, I study it. Been doing this for 7.5 years, and I see the work that we do here, and then I compare it to how just mainstream news, once again, I'm not taking sides on any Fox News, CNN, MSNBC, I don't care. I see how once in a while they dabble in disappearances and how off it is. It is so off. And so then I have to also think whatever else they're reporting on, that stuff's all off too. That's how I think about things. So I don't know if that's true or not. And it's very sad anytime. And no matter if it's just one kid that goes missing or is found murdered. All very sad. I just don't know if it's statistically true that within the last year more of that is happening. And very well, unfortunately, this is the person I have to be. If it is getting reported more, are they doing that just so they can bump up their ratings because stories about kids going missing get attention? It's good for selling ads. So I just don't know. But I appreciate you asking the question. It's just factually, I don't think I can answer it here in the short term. We might be able to look back in 5 years, and if we can look at NamUs or the Charlie Project or whatever, well, was it true that more kids went missing and are still missing here 23 into 24? Then we'll know. I just think here in the moment, it's hard to tell. Next question. In fact, this person asked me 2 questions, and I'm just going to answer them in a row. First one, I'm not going to mention the person or the podcast. The person asking me the question says that this other host of a true crime podcast does not interview family members because this person wants objective facts. This person asking me, is this, in your opinion, a problem? So by interviewing family members like I do, does this give a skewed idea of what actually happened? It could. It could. It just depends how much work you want to go into preparing for an interview. I think by this time, and I get this quite a bit, that even today, to this day, where people will say, well, I was listening to the interview, and just about the time that I was thinking this question needed to be asked, you asked that exact question, Ed. That comes from experience. I would not say that, you go back to the first interviews I did for Unfound, going back to 2016 with Mary Lyle and some others. other people. This is a learned skill. And so it certainly can be a problem if you're talking to somebody who is certainly could be biased, but you have to be intent on asking hard questions. And I think I do that. Certainly the interviews, we follow outlines, and we may go off on a tangent or two. And in those outlines, if you've ever seen any of them, there will be sample questions. So the guest is prepared of, well, what are we going to talk about kind of in this section? And I will put the sample questions. And once again, we don't talk about topics that the guest doesn't want to talk about. And sometimes we don't do names, and that's all usually due to the guest. But if the guest is going to say something, then I have a right to ask about it and not necessarily just clarify it. And yes, sometimes challenge it. And so you have to have the courage to do that. You have to have the courage to, even though you're trying to help the guest out and you feel for this guest and you want this disappearance solved and everything, but as a reporter, I still have to make sure that the guest just can't say anything he or she wants. And of course, that's why we don't do live interviews. It very well could be once in a while that the guest goes off on a tangent, it's being recorded, and then I have to bring this person back kind of like to the center. Well, anything that goes way outside the boundaries that may go into, defamatory, an area that could be defamatory or complete speculation and theorizing and everything else is going to get deleted. But that doesn't happen too often. Because trust me, there are some guests that would surely love to just come on and do an interview and do nothing but criticize the police, go on, and go after the suspect if there is one, and surely call that person every name in the book. Surely. There are guests like that. There are. So I understand when it comes to objectivity, well, you try to handle that as best you can. I do by just asking tough questions and then all of you deciding what you want to believe. As it comes with any interview that I've ever done, it's up to you to decide what you want to believe or not. And I've learned enough to know that most of you do not take the guest at his or her word sometimes. You think, well, maybe I think they're just seeing what they want to see. It's totally up for you to determine that. The problem, regarding, this particular other host saying, well, I don't want to interview family members because it won't be objective. Well, that's up to you. We realize that they may not be objective, but you can certainly be objective. You, the interviewer, can be objective. But to do that, you have to know the topic. You have to know disappearances. You have to understand that disappearance pretty well. You have to be able to determine what's BS and what's not. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that every single guest that has ever appeared on Unfound has told the truth. I would be certainly naive to say that. Certainly. You just have to understand there are certain things about all these disappearances that cannot be proven. There's no way to do that. But on the other hand, there's certain things that need to be discussed. And that's why I put it on all of your hands. I don't tell you what to think. Whatever theory you want to come up regarding a disappearance is up to you. I would never think that you have to think like I do. Hopefully we're all learning here. But I certainly like to think that, I'm not trying to indoctrinate anybody. So it could be a problem, and once in a while, well, why don't you go out and try to track the suspect down? I could do that, but you don't really think I'm going to ask the suspect, well, what happened? And he's going to say, yeah, I killed her. You don't think he's really going to say that, do you? We know what for example, if we want to really get specific on this, the man said type of disappearance. These guys saying, yeah, my wife took off. You don't really think that guy's going to change his story when he talks to me, do you? Because that's what the guest says. Now, I'm not saying you have to believe it. I'm not saying you don't have to believe it. All we do is talk about what he do, what he say. And yes, and the way I do things is when I do talk to these people and I take notes, yeah, I do check into some of what they said, if I can. And if their story kind of goes along with what has been documented so far. But it's not just about when I interview these people to get the facts out. I want you all to hear what it's like for people to live with this. And it's seeming like there's no way out. They are in a nightmare in which there seems to be, I'm not saying there isn't, certainly disappearances do get solved, there seems to be no way out. All of us can go to bed at night and have a nightmare, wake up from it. These people can't. So it's not always just about facts. It's about them living with the situation. It's also about them kind of being a cautionary tale. My daughter got into this. My son got into this. This is why it happened. Hopefully that can help some of you who are raising kids, maybe to make sure your sons and daughters don't go off the rails like many of Unfound's missing people have. So it's just not about the facts. Remember, it's not unusual. You can check this. It's not unusual for us not even to get into the disappearance itself whenever it happened until like 45 minutes or an hour into the disappearance. Why? Because we spend so much time talking about the missing person. That alone should tell you it's just not about the facts. It's about getting to know that person. And maybe we can all learn from this. What have I said? Disappearances are not about circumstances. They're about people. So I dispute, that, objective facts, it's facts are facts. And just because somebody says something doesn't necessarily mean it's a fact. It's just the fact that that person said something. But what I would say is the interviews that I do are much more than just about the facts. And, the alternative, of course, if you don't want to talk to any family members, you want to talk to the police, and how much do you think they're going to tell you? So if you don't want to talk to them, who are you going to talk to? Well, then it devolves into what I would say what ends up happening is too many people just start doing their podcasts, and what are they doing? They're going to Wikipedia. They're going to Web Sleuths. Well, guess what? There are a lot of mistakes on all of those sites. And what happens? The same mistakes get retread over and over and over and over. So even these people who think that, I don't want to talk to the family because they may be skewing things, and I can't talk to the police because they don't tell me anything, what do they end up doing? They then end up regurgitating information that's wrong. Why? Because there's no way to check those facts either. Sometimes. So I will pick the way I do it more than any other way there is to do it, unless you just get to the point. I suppose if we could just rationalize this ultimately all way, I guess maybe these disappearances shouldn't be covered at all. If you really want to get crazy with it. In fact, I said that wasn't recently to somebody who was giving me a hard time, or I've said it more than once. Maybe you'd just be happy if we didn't cover these disappearances at all, criticizing the way I go about my business. If you don't have an alternative way to do it, don't come to me with a problem if you don't have a fix. And my opinion is all the other ways to do it just don't work. There's no perfect way. If there was a perfect way, all of these disappearances would be solved by now. But they're not. There's no perfect way. There's just a best way and the right way. So the second part of it is that you brought up in an Unfound Live that a guest withheld valuable information. Do you think this happens often, sometimes seldom? I've brought it up. I don't mind talking about it publicly because I've done it before. It was the Unicaris. Maybe this is what this
person means. I covered the disappearance of Unique Harris, and of course, Isaac Moy was charged not too long after that episode came out. And it turned out that Unique's mother knew some information that she did not divulge in the interview. And it very well, am I mad about that? I wouldn't say I'm mad. I'm just a little disappointed. But given that it was so close to when this guy got charged, it very well could be that she withheld some of this information because she knew the police were about to charge this guy and she just didn't want to blow it. It's very possible. I've never talked to her about it. That's the one that kind of pops up into my mind, and I'm not even sure if this is the one that I was talking about. You brought it up in an Unfound Live that I'm guessing that this is the particular disappearance. Do you think this happens often, sometimes, seldom? If you have the feeling the guest is not totally honest, do you accept this or do you deny an interview? Well, like I said before, I'm not going to allow somebody to come on to the podcast and say things that I know aren't true. First of all. On the other hand, I don't know what these people do know. All I can do is ask questions, and they're under no obligation to tell me everything. I think most of them do. I think they understand that I'm here to help. I'm putting the work in. I'm taking the time, and they feel obligated to be as transparent as possible. But I'm also not going to sit here and tell you that every person has said every piece of information they know about a disappearance. That would once again be naive. Like I said before, I'm not going to get here and say that every person's told the truth. There's just certain things that are unprovable. My goal, though, is to make sure that everything makes sense and nobody's being defamed. And we're all doing our best, and I'm doing my best to be objective, which means having to ask some questions that may make the guest uncomfortable. And not kissing the guest's butt. So do I think this, I don't know how often it happens. It doesn't worry me about if some people withhold things. But like I stated before regarding that guy that worked for the government, and that was just something. When I get worried is when I know that there's certainly information that is factual that certainly could point us all in a particular direction, and then that person doesn't want to talk about it. That is going to be a reason that a person cannot come on the podcast. So, so it's not totally honest. No, I don't accept it. I don't accept it. No. Now, there may be confusion or something, and I've had a couple times where I had all my notes, we started doing the interview, and then the person starts answering the questions completely the opposite of what the person said before, and I'll stop the interview. I have to remember it was a long time ago. And I remember the disappearance. Of course, I'm not going to mention the name. But I actually had to stop the interview and say to the person, what's going on here? These things that I'm asking you, you're saying the exact opposite of what you told me before. And she admitted she was having cold feet and was worried about everything. Well, I said, well, they can't. And she finally came around. I can't do this then. But that's, like I said, it's been a while. And, but it's happened there's been a few times where I've taken notes, an off-the-record conversation, and the guest said one thing, and then when I started looking it up and started looking at old news stories and doing what I can, have had to go back to the person and say, you told me this, but I found this. Why is there a contradiction? Why the conflict between what you told me and what I read this news article? Very well may be that the news article is wrong. Very well may be that they misremembered it or something, and we try to resolve that stuff before we ever do an official interview. Next question. In fact, I'm going to two questions, one from two different people. I'm going to combine it into one because they're kind of similar. Why don't more police departments have missing persons units, especially in large
in bigger cities? First of all, I don't know how many big cities. So for all of those, what do we mean by big cities? Well, of course we mean New York, L.A., I think, is Houston third now? I know Chicago for a long time was third, but Chicago's certainly up there. Houston, Chicago, what would be the next biggest city after that? Maybe Miami or Dallas. Maybe we can talk, St. Louis. I mean, it's obviously a major city. How many of these have missing persons units and how many don't? I think most of the big ones do. And I don't know what the line is. Is it a population or a city below a certain level, whether you get a missing persons unit or not? I don't know how it's determined. Like anything else, people cost money. Departments cost money. And it doesn't help, at least in the United States, in many of these cities, the people are moving out. Whether it's due to crime, whether it's due to housing prices going up, whether it has to do with businesses moving to more hospitable environments. So we hear a lot of course, here in Florida, we hear a lot of people moving from the Northeast, people moving from New York, Connecticut, Massachusetts due to the taxes and everything else that goes on up there. Once again, not here to get into the politics of it. And so these cities get under crunches, even the state of California, where a lot of people were moving to forever. California's population actually has gone down over the last couple of years, people moving from there for a lot of different reasons. Maybe even when I lived in Las Vegas, there were a lot of California people moving there, moving to Arizona, moving to Utah, moving to Texas. Things happen. And hey, I grew up in Pennsylvania, so I don't live where I grew up either. So these things cost money, first of all. Second of all, to do something like this, you actually have to see it as a problem. If they don't have for example, if they don't have a car theft unit, if it turns out that statistically or factually that the city's car thefts have gone up, what will they do? They'll create a task force to crack down on this. What's going on? Is there some new gang that moved into town? Or, there's certain cars that they're specializing in stealing. Why is this? They will create these kind of task forces. We've also seen when it seems like there might be a serial killer, like when we had the shootings in the D.C. area. Yes, they had a homicide unit, but what did they do? They started like a task force, pulling in a bunch of different people from different areas to kind of look into this, because it was, these guys were serial killers going around shooting from the trunk of that car. Remember that going back some years now. That was going on, I think, while I was at Star Trek. It's been like 20 years now, but it seems like yesterday. And so they can do this, but to have something that is constant, that actually has its own offices with missing persons department on the door or wing of the building or whatever, you actually have to see this as a problem. You actually have, and on top of that, if you're going to create something like that, then there should be some education that goes along with it. You just don't throw a bunch of people in there and you're going to do this. But that's what's done. We do have missing persons units in New York City, L.A., and these other big cities. I don't know if these people working these cases know any more than any of you do. No offense. But they're the ones, their jobs. They're supposed to know. I realize you listen to this podcast. I'm trying to educate you. I'm educating myself. But I happen to think that many of you would do fine jobs, more serious jobs, than if you were in these missing persons units. But I'm reminded, I know this is a funny place to go with this, but there was a Law and Order. Was it Law and Order, the regular one, like the original one? The one I know it's come back out again. But the one that was like between 1990 and 2014 or whenever it was it that one? I think it was the Prime, what they called Law and Order Prime, the first one, in which the homicide detectives had to deal with like a missing persons unit or detective, and they portrayed it as some little department that's down in the basement, and somebody's just like kicked back in a chair with the feet up on the desk. And I got to tell you, I don't know how much difference that is from the truth. I think that the missing persons unit, for example, there's a reason that you hear so many of the guests talk about how, our disappearance is only 8 years old and we've had 5 different detectives. There are reasons. And this would be the situation now granted, a lot of that is with departments that don't have specific, concentrated, dedicated missing persons units. But even in New York City, we've covered some disappearances there, Chelsea, Cobo, etc. We've covered some disappearances in LA. We've covered some disappearances in some big cities. Same thing. It's like a carousel of different detectives and investigators over the years. Nobody wants to be part of that. If you want to be an investigator, if you want to go the investigation route in a department, in contrast to like the manager route, where you actually then become head of chief of police or whatever, the lowest rung on, you can be on is the missing persons unit. Nobody aspires to be in the missing persons unit. You have to remember that. So why don't more police departments have missing persons units? It takes money. You have to see it as a problem. And it actually maybe has to be a job that somebody actually wants to do. And those are all issues. So I think that's the reason. Now, of course, I'm going to excuse these small police departments, of course. I mean, the little town that I grew up, Leechburg, Pennsylvania, are there any unsolved disappearances there right now? I don't think so. They have like 2 cops. Vandergrift, which is like kind of next door, which is a bigger town, what do they have? 3 or 4 cops. I mean, what do you expect them to do? So I realized that I have to temper my expectations regarding this. I just don't know how many big cities have them and how many don't. Either way, even if they do, I'm not sure what kind of impact they're having. We could look at Chelsea Cobo's disappearance. There's a lot of facts with her disappearance, a lot of people, a lot of names. We have these locations. We have phone calls. We know her mother's very, very motivated to try to figure out what happened to Chelsea. She's still missing, and New York Police Department's the largest police department in the United States. So even just having a missing persons unit may not matter. It takes more than that. So the second part of the question, or not second part, but somebody else asked me a question that was kind of similar. If you were in charge of a missing persons unit at a police station, what changes would you make to finding a missing person more successful? First of all, my biggest thing would be to add some pride to it. Biggest thing what I would do is make sure it's not seen as being like the lowest of all these special investigation departments. Number one, you have to take pride in your work. You want people, what is coach of the, Mike Tomlin, coach of the Steelers. Now I think the longest tenured coach in the NFL, and being that Bill Belichick has retired for this time being from the Patriots. What does Mike Tomlin say about the players that play for him? He wants volunteers, not hostages. He wants players who want to be Pittsburgh Steelers. He doesn't want people there who don't want to be there. This is my attitude that I would bring to a missing persons unit. First and foremost, we have to get some pride here. We have to be excited about our work no matter what happens. Remember, doctors who work on cancer, they see a lot of death. they don't move over necessarily to doing plastic surgery. They stick with it. This is the attitude you have to have. This isn't just something so you can move on to some other post that you see as being more important. If you're going to be here, you're going to be an all-star. That's what you're going to do. And we're going to be happy about our work, and we're going to take pride in it. We're going to be happy to be doing what we're doing. That, to me, is more important than bringing more money into it or whatever else. Being motivated to do something can overcome a lot of hurdles that money can't. So that's a change. I'm sure that would be a change. That's not the feeling that I get. I don't know how much that's going on of that. So I think me coming in and having that attitude, I think would be a huge change. No increase in pay or anything, but if you're in this unit, we're going to find a way to be happy being here, to the point that maybe you're not going to be so motivated to get the heck out and do, and go over to a different unit, vice or car theft, robbery, bank robbery, or homicide, or whatever else. That alone, I think, would bring a lot more success. Then, going along with that, what can bring a lot of pride and confidence to people? Educating them. Get them to become experts, to know what they're talking about. I continue to believe that people do want to know things, and they love to know a lot and be able to put it to use. Give those people those tools. So that would be a couple changes, and these are surely two things that are not being done. Next question. I think I've answered this question more than once, but it comes up. You just would not know. Over the course of a year, granted I do this Q&A once a year. Like I said, it's amazing. This is number 6. I thought it was like number 3 or 4. I said that before. Comes up at least once a month over the course of a year. Why are you single? Ed, are you single? La 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 la, yada 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 yada. And I think this is the reason it comes up is because I do talk about being single, and because the audience is 80, as with any podcast or YouTube channel or TV show or whatever, the audience is 80% women. Why are you single? Well, first of all, you should know something. This is new. Is that I was told by a very trusted person. I would call this person a friend of the podcast. You know how I refer to certain people who help with the podcast. They aren't volunteers or assistants, but they've either appeared on the podcast or, like Dr. Grace Telesco. This is not who mentioned this, but somebody like that. I just refer to them as friends of the podcast. And this person told me just within the last couple months that this person knows some other people within the true crime community, and my name came up, and there was this talk about whether, am I gay? The answer is no. Not and to do the whole Seinfeld thing. Not that there's anything wrong with that, But that was actually a conversation, I guess, some other people, within the true crime community were having about me, and this got back to me, and I have no reason to believe that this be a lie. This would not surprise me at all. But the issue is that even though I'm a very public person when it comes to the podcast, doing the live show, going in and talking to people, and I have no problems with, I don't want to, what is it, agoraphobia? I do not have an agoraphobia at all. I can go up, talk in front of people. It doesn't necessarily have to be about disappearances. You want me to get up there and talk about disc golf? I can do that. You want me to get up there and talk about movies from the 1980s? I can do that, and there's really no fear or anything. Certainly, I go to trivia every week. There's usually 100-some people there. I do not have agoraphobia. But I need a lot of space. I need a lot of space. I've had roommates. Had a great roommate. Her name was Crystal for 2 years. She was more like a sister to me. We were not romantically linked. In fact, she met her future husband while we were roommates in Las Vegas. I lived with 2 other women before I left Las Vegas. Once again, just friends. No romantics going on there. Just worked out financially for both of us. But when it comes to my romantic life and everything, I need a lot of space. And I like living by myself. And I think one of the main keys is that I don't get lonely. And at 53, I think I've had enough living behind me to know that a reason a lot of people get married, and I would say this is a bad reason, or get into relationships, and I would say it's a bad reason, is because they are lonely. I think that is a very, very, very bad reason to be in a relationship. But a lot of people do that. Well, I don't get lonely, so I'm not motivated to do that. I've always been a little bit of a loner, even going back to high school. Many great friends and everything. But I had no problems back in the day just cruising around by myself, going to different hangout spots, showing up, talking for a while with whoever was there, and then jumping in my car and going to another spot. Being in Leechburg, going to Lower Burrell, going to Vandergrift, going over to like the Greensburg area, just by myself, because I had friends in all of these areas. And a lot of times I did that by myself. And then also, I don't know if it's affected me, but I was raised an only child. So once again, I had a lot of space. I never had to share anything, share possessions, or share love between my parents and any other kids. Remember, my biological siblings were actually raised by the biological parents. I was not. So I think that that's a huge factor in me being single at 53. And I think maybe why this has come up, is he straight? What is he? Is, because I guess maybe I do have a lot of redeeming qualities. And certainly I have had girlfriends. And certainly I've had some experience that I can't talk about here and everything else. But the reason I'm single is because I just need a lot of space. In addition, I will also tell you that I just don't run into a lot of women who I'm attracted to. That seemed to happen a lot more when I lived in Las Vegas. Of course, being involved in entertainment helps. And that helps. But that's not the situation that I have here in Florida. But just the way it goes sometimes. Although I think this move to Florida has in many ways been positive, there are things about Las Vegas that I do miss, and I do love that city, even though it's certainly changed since I've been there, and they're running out of water and everything else. But the other issue, though, is when it comes to my taste in women, I like women who are like myself, who also like space. And so you can understand, and certainly there are people like myself who like a different type. Maybe they do like, people who don't like space or something. My tastes go toward women who are like myself, who are not motivated to live together, who are okay with just seeing each other like a couple times a week and doing this and doing that, and maybe going on a vacation once in a while, going on a trip. And that's the only type of situation that's interesting to me. But also on top of that, I have very high standards when it comes to all the other stuff as well. As far as looks and intelligence, I have very high standards simply because that's what I'm used to. And trying to find any women like that is tough. And it doesn't bother me. I'm perfectly fine in this situation. I'm not complaining at all. At all. Perfectly fine with it. But that's the reason, is that I'm a particular type of guy. And the type of women that I'm interested are rare. They exist. Certainly, some of my ex-girlfriends are those types, and there's reasons that it didn't work out. But maybe the reason it didn't work out is because we are who we are. That we need our space. We don't want to have to talk to that person every day. We won't have to feel obligated to say, well, how was your day? And if you don't, there's going to be repercussions. I don't want to be in a relationship like that. There's nobody in my life who ever has to ever ask me, how was your day? All right. Whereas to a lot of people, that's important. It's not important to me. So there's nobody, as I have said many times, there's nobody that I'd want to see or talk to every day. Now, I talk to my dad every day simply because we're separated by 1,000 miles. All right, and he's 87 years old, and I don't know how many days he has left on this earth. Other than that, though, even though my brother lives 20 minutes away, we certainly do not talk every day. So, how many women are really interested in that type of situation? Probably not too many. They're certainly out there, but they're rare. They're very independent women. They're usually women who are running their own businesses. They're professional types, and that's great. Fantastic. Love it. Love it. But, the overall package is rare, and I'm not one for compromise. So, my taste in women is very much like who I am, and I'm very unique. I mean, how many guys do you know at 53 who have never been married, don't have any kids, are heterosexual, and actually don't have a criminal record and don't have any mental health issues and all those other things? I, by myself, am a very, 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 very rare cat. Very rare. Given all of that put together. And actually, on top of that, I think it has some redeeming qualities that I'm take care of myself, I'm funny, I'm sociable, and everything else. It's very rare. Likewise, the women that I'm interested in are very rare, too. So that's on top of everything. That's why I'm single. So, hard to have a serious relationship, I have written here. Hard to have a serious relationship with people who are so dang independent. So once again, I answered that question. I think I answered it a different way. And probably next year I'll answer it a different way, but it'll still be the truth. This is all the truth. Next question, I make it a point to, even if I don't get this question, I make it a point to say it anyway. And that is what got me into this. As I've said many times before, but I know there are many of you who are new to the podcast. How I got into this. I've always been interested in disappearances. Since I was a little kid, there was the show In Search Of with Leonard Nimoy. Opened my eyes and mind as like a 6 or 7 year old. Oh my gosh, there's this world out there where the UFOs and Amelia Earhart and vampires in the Nazca, or wasn't the Nazca lines or whatever they're called, etc. Man, what is going on out there? Me and this house out there in Gilpin Township in Pennsylvania, and all this being brought to the screen back in the 1970s. I was like, wow, this is incredible. Now, of course, I look back at it now and say, well, they were certainly spinning some yarns on that show, and that show certainly was cheesy and everything else, but to a 7-year-old, it was just like the most fascinating thing ever. And I think that's kind of what got my mind going. And then there was cops, even though I never wanted to be a police officer, but there was the cops that started it in the 90s, Bad Boys, What You Gonna Do? And then also my friends, the Kara Stories, they were all brothers, 3 of them. Their father was a part-time cop, so they had a scanner in their house, which always fascinated me. Listening to what's going on out there. You can listen, you can hear the cops from different jurisdictions and what they're doing, where they're going. And then the internet came along. And I remember the first disappearance I ever looked up on the internet was Jodi Huisentruit, which conveniently, unfortunately, very sadly started around the same time. Her disappearance happened right around the time we got the internet. in Leechburg, PA around 1995. And already I was discovering that my mind goes very well with accumulating facts and organizing them. I'd already had this interest in plane crashes by that point. And anytime there would be a plane crash, of course, back then, with commercial airliners, they were crashing a lot more than they do now. And so I'd tune in and just watch over and over and over and over and over the coverage of plane crashes. And that was like, I guess CNN was the only 24/7 news source at that time. The other ones came in a little bit later. But even CBS or whatever, they might devote a lot of time to a plane crash. I got interested in that because I had a fear of flying. And then I got some speaking experience and a lot of writing experience and improv comedy experience and acting experience and filmmaking experience and all that. And then finally, all of that, the technology caught up with all of my interests, all of that other stuff, podcasting, and that's how Unfound came together. Of course, I was involved in another true crime podcast before this one that didn't work out, where I hosted the show with another person. And even then I was thinking, you know what, as Jack Black, what was his Ned? Not Dewey Finn, although he went by Ned Schneebly in the movie School of Rock. What does he say in that one scene? He goes, I got vision up the butt, so get out, stay out of the way. Don't pull a power play on me. I got vision up the butt. I figured that's kind of the way I'm, and once again, why it didn't work out as an independent filmmaker. I have a certain thing that I want to do, and that's it. So that's how it all came together. It was genetically, my mind, environmentally, everything that was subjected to me that I ran into over the course of my life from a 7-year-old, and then the technology of podcasting. That is how it all came together, and every part of it was needed. That's how I got into this. Almost done, but I left these ones where I needed some notes until the end. And one is about a disappearance that has not been covered by Unfound yet. The next question is then about people getting involved. And then the third one is going to be about Brian Schaefer. These are all asked by the same person, but at least on the first part, I needed to do a little research because I know this disappearance, but to answer the question, I had to actually look into it. So the question was, I believe you say if you watched the series Never Seen Again, I found the most intriguing case to be that of Kelly Brannon, who disappeared from a motel in rural Florida, in Live Oak, where she was living with her boyfriend. And so the question is, how would you counsel law enforcement to approach this investigation? In other words, I'm asking what you believe an effective investigation would look like, given the facts already known about the case. So this is what I'm going to try to do, but I don't want to get into all the nooks and crannies of this disappearance, because if I get into all of them, I'm sure you're going to forget a lot of them anyway. But for the record, I don't know what the police have done. I've never spoken to anybody in her family about her disappearance. It just happens to coincidentally have taken place here in Florida. So other than what is public, I don't know any. I know all of what you know. All right, so just keep that in mind. What I would say is that there are certain things that I want to pick out. Once again, I'm not getting, all of you are just going to have to look up this disappearance for yourselves, because if I go through all of it, you're not going to remember most of it anyway. But if the following is true, what I've read about the facts for it regarding going, for example, to the Charlie Project, and then I think that I have watched this episode of Never Seen Again, but it's been months and months ago. So what I would say in general is you got to follow up on anything a person of interest has said. Now, this is the man said type of disappearance. I'll give you that. So anytime you have the man said, where the guy is saying, well, the woman took off, she got in a truck with somebody, she did this, she did that, you as an investigator have to follow up on all of it. And, of course, what you're looking, of course, for is the guy lying or not. My perception is this isn't done enough. My perception is too often investigators, the first police officer on the scene, just kind of believes whatever the guy says. Now, it very well may be that eventually that attitude changes. That eventually, unfortunately not a couple days down the road, but a month down the road or something, it may change. And then that police officer, that investigator starts thinking, you know what, I think this guy lied to me. Whereas what I would say is that when you show up to something like this, you have to, unfortunately, I know, remember, here at Unfound, we're not in the law business. We're in the information business. And I realize here in the United States, we have an idea of a person is innocent until proven guilty. Well, I will tell you that when you're an investigator and you're showing up like something with the disappearance of Kelly Brannon, Brannon, it's best just to show up thinking, as soon as the guy starts talking and saying, well, she took off and I don't know what happened to her, it's best just to think that he's lying. And you're going to check every single thing that guy says. And so with that as our starting point regarding this type of disappearance, here are some things that I see just reading about her disappearance. Is that it says here that they plan to buy a house in Detroit and live there. Is that true? If this is something this guy told investigators, yeah, we were heading from Florida to Detroit, and they were going to be buying a house somewhere. Well, what's the address of that house? Is there any proof that they had any interactions with a homeowner or a real estate agent there? And that's very easy to figure out. If the guy says so, you just ask him, well, what's the name of the realtor? What's the address? I'd like to check into that. Now, if he doesn't want to show you, then that's a huge red flag, of course. Next thing is the story goes is that they were headed there, and the guy involved in Kelly's life, his truck broke down. So they're in different vehicles, and they're both going from Florida to Michigan, and his truck broke down on allegedly July 9th of 2020. And they were staying in the hotel while they waited for the vehicle to get repaired. Is that true? Well, where is the truck? Where was it getting worked on? It broke down on July 9th. Why wasn't it fixed by July 14th or 15th? What exactly was wrong with it? Did the transmission go? Did the engine blow up? Did it spring a leak? Was it leaking coolant? What exactly was the problem? And does it sound reasonable that it would take 5 or 6 days to get fixed? Now, my dad was in a wreck a month ago. He still hasn't gotten his vehicle back. Not a bad one. He's fine. I'm not even sure it was his fault. But once again, if this guy's going to say my truck got broken down, well, is that true? Got to check it out. So the next part of it, after an argument, Brannon, the missing woman, left the hotel room but continued contact with Emerson with text messages. Can this guy Emerson show police these text messages? And does it seem, and if being that you have his phone, you don't have her phone, he certainly has other texts from her from the past. Does it look like is the language consistent? The prior text messages, let's say from 2 months ago, do those look like the ones that were sent the night of the disappearance? You could look into that. Emerson says he took her car keys away from her so she wouldn't drive under the influence. So he says that she was drunk. Does he have her keys? That's what he says he did, but does he have her keys? Where is her car? Can we look at it? Can we do forensics on it? Because if his vehicle was getting worked on, and if there was foul play, then I guess he must have used her vehicle to get rid of her. So, can we look at that vehicle? You have the keys, thanks. Well, we're going to look in it, and she's a missing person. They would have every right to do that. They would not need a warrant to do that. Next, once again, according to the published reports, it says shortly before 1 a.m., Brandon left a voicemail for Emerson saying she had gotten another room at the hotel for herself and was threatening to leave him and go to Detroit by herself or go to Iceland. I'm not making this up. So, if this was a voicemail, was Emerson able to play this voicemail for investigators? And some of you maybe know this disappearance very well. Maybe you know some of these answers already. But this is what should have been done. I don't know if it was done or not. Could he play that message saying that she said that? In addition, police could easily go to the office and say, hey, there's this woman. Did she really get a room for herself? What if the answer is no? In addition, she said she was threatening to go to Iceland. Well, she was drunk. Maybe she could make that up. Did she have a passport to go to Iceland? And of course, already at this point, you're saying, well, she's threatening to leave him to go by herself. And then it says suddenly she announced she was getting in a car, and that was when the messages ended. So in addition, some other things that could, of course, she was never seen again. Her purse, money, identification, and other belongings were left behind at the hotel inside her unlocked car. Why would she do that? But her phone and a guitar were missing, and it's a very unique guitar in that it's a left-handed guitar. So even though those are rare already, Fender Stratocaster with a sunburst finish, and branding is sanded off the headstock, so it's unique. Very unique left-handed guitar with the Fender, I guess, logo taken off of it for some reason. And I guess it's still missing. Did you check any pawn shops? And in the area, how many pawn shops could there be around Live Oak, Florida? And because certainly guitars are something that are often pawned, especially a left-handed one would be unique. In addition, maybe get on eBay or Facebook store, whatever they're calling it. Anybody selling something like that. These are all things that you can do to figure out if this guy is telling the truth or not. So those are some of the things that just come to mind. And if all of that checks out, and it sounds like this guy is telling the truth, that yes, they were talking to a realtor. And yes, his truck was broke down. And yes, you go into the car and there are no signs of violence. And you don't find and you do find that she really did register for another room, on and on and on. Then I guess we have to start thinking that this guy really didn't have anything to do with this. And that she really did walk off. And being that she was drunk, I think that raises the possibility that is what she did. But certainly, if this guy Emerson is going to offer up all of this information, then you as an investigator, you are obligated to check every single thing. So that's my answer to that part of it. Without knowing those answers, I don't know what to think of it. Very well could be that she walked off with her guitar and something happened. I doubt she got in a car with somebody, though. I doubt it. Either Emerson did something to her or she was drunk and walked off and died in the woods around there or something. Those are really the only two options, though. All right, next question. Is there any case or two Unfound has covered that you believe that is close to being solved if only some motivated and thoughtful member of the public or group would devote the time to running down publicly available leads? What I'm asking is if any cases come to mind that are ripe for being solved if a dedicated group were to come in and do some serious legwork. This is inspired by the Paul Sanders podcast that some Unfounders are working on. Yeah, that's going on. Really hate picking out any. So I'm going to try not to do that, but I'm going to do it anyway. It's kind of going to try to walk a fine line here. What I would say is any of the disappearances where there is ample reason to believe the people walked off, ran off, and there's no foul play. Just some examples, even though there are many choices. David Hardy Jr., David Schrader, Renee LaManna, and there are many, many more. Any of these, in which the odds of being a foul play are very, 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 very low. And it's also the odds are very, 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 very low that this person got in a car and took off with somebody. The person got picked up randomly. Because what we're left with is this person walked off and has to be somewhere in the area. Of course, with David Hardy Jr. having dementia or Alzheimer's, his car is abandoned. He's somewhere in that area. You know me with searches. Just search a mile in any direction and you just keep doing that. David Schrader, same thing. Renee LaMonna, she was out essentially on an island. Where could she go? Maybe she went into the water. That would certainly make searching for her difficult, especially since it was 30 years ago. But any of these where it's reasonable, it's ample reason to believe that the person ran off, walk off, there was no foul play. All of those. Because it's just a matter of getting a group together, going out there and searching again, even though some of these disappearances are fairly old. So as for ones where there are actually foul play situations, where there's a good reason to believe it was foul play, I think our experience teaches us that any of the man said disappearances. And what do I mean by experience? Well, of course, with Andrea Bowman, her father, of course, said that she ran off. Of course, she didn't. Carlos Rodriguez said that Zoe Campos drove away from her house. Of course, we know that she didn't. So then it could lead us to believe that any of the man-said type of disappearances are certainly ripe as well from history. But also what goes into that is most of these guys are not career criminals. And I'm not going to pick out any names or any disappearances. Some of you should know with some of these that I pick out. I don't really want to go there picking any out. But any of these where they're the man-said type of disappearances and the man, are not career criminals. These are the guys who are most likely to crack. These are the guys who are most likely to make mistakes. These are the guys who are most likely to eventually display some sort of conscience. These are the ones that I think are very ripe for being solved. Because you have a pretty good idea what happened anyway. It's just sitting down and figuring out, how are we going to do this? In contrast to maybe, I'll just pick one out, like a Jason Jolkowski, where anything's possible. So what also helps is that being that these guys do not have criminal records, a lot of them, either before the disappearance or after the disappearance, these men, to this day, they go to the store, and anybody, for the record, nobody should go out and harass these guys. Do not do that. Do not stalk them. Do not try to cut them off in public. Do not go to their house and stand on public property, but you have a bullhorn screaming at their house. Don't do any of that. Don't do that. All right? I know some of you, I suppose you may legally be able to get away with standing on private property and shouting at the house or something like that, at least for a little while. Don't do that. But these guys are continuing to live their lives. They're out in public. They probably have groups that they're involved in. They go shopping, or they go to church or whatever else. This gives ample opportunity for people who are so motivated to get to know these guys. And maybe, just maybe, you can work within their defenses somehow, one way or another, where they do start talking about their wives and girlfriends who went missing. And of course, I'm never going to expect they're just going to come out and say what happened and whether they're guilty or not. But you never know what's going to come out of their mouths. But it maybe is time. I try to put myself in the position. What if one of my friends was in a position? What if one of my friends who was married, his wife went missing? I'll just pick somebody out to make it easier. My friend Doug, who lives in North Carolina, who I've known since elementary school, who's one of my best friends, spectacular guy. What if his wife went missing? And what if he was saying, the man said type of example? We went to bed. I woke up the next day, and her car was here, her clothes were here, her phones were here, la 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 la, but she's missing. And I've never been to Doug's house, but I know where he lives, and it's in a neighborhood. It's not a suburb, but their house is next door, and I think maybe he has a little bit of woods in the back and everything else. How would I feel about that? Of course, it'd be a very unique situation given that I do disappearances for work. But I think that I would be inclined to inquire about the situation and have a talk with him and everything. And I just wonder, these guys have friends. What are these friends doing? What do these friends who have known these men for years and years and years say about these guys? And what do they think? Is there anything that we need to know about this guy? What makes them tick? Certainly my friends who have known me for 40 years, like Doug has known me, certainly I think in some ways knows what makes me tick. Like I kind of know like what Doug and all my friends, just from being around them. And, we've known each other long enough. We know where the hot buttons are and everything else. Well, this is kind of what I'm thinking. We're allowed to do that in the United States. Don't harass them. Don't stalk them. Don't confront them in a supermarket pointing fingers at them and yelling and everything else. Don't do any of that. You do any of that, I'm not going to support it. I do not support any of that. What I do support is rational, calm, thoughtful questioning. And getting to know that person, being around that person, if you can do that, and finding anybody who has any interaction with that guy and seeing, and it very well may be, hey, you can never dismiss anything. It very well may be some people who really know these guys well don't even know the guy's wife's missing. There's no law in the United States against telling his friends, you know what, did you know that John Smith's wife is missing? And do you know the circumstances? Because it very well may be his friends think, well, he just told us she left him. They may just believe that. They may just want to believe that. Well, you may just have to enlighten them. But I think that the man said types, like I said, are ripe for that. This kind of getting very up close and personal, I guess you might say, with a suspect, with the people around the suspect. Don't bother going to family. That's not going to work. Coworkers may work. Friends and groups, like maybe, for me, maybe it would be my disc golf friends here in Florida, as an example. For my brother Brian, it might be the people that he works with for the part-time job that he has. For my brother's wife, Laureen, it might be, if she's not causing my brother Brian's disappearance, it might be the people that in the school district that she used to work in that got to know her better. All of this, I think this is something something novel to do that I don't think is being done too much out there. So I don't want to pick out any particular cases. I'll just pick out what I think is a particular type that is more likely to be solved than other types. For example, on the other hand, surely something bad happened to Patty Action, who disappeared in Clearwater back in 1979. How do we know? The car had all of her blood in it. But good luck. I'm not saying it can't be solved, but that was 40-some years ago, and that seems to me to be a lot more difficult because it very well could have been something random. Whereas we know these man said ones are not random with 99% certainty. So you pick the ones where you pretty much think you know what happened, and then you try to work your way around the legalities and of trying to figure out what happened and not invading anybody's rights. I think that's better off than picking one that's really, really, totally up in the air and then trying to figure out where to go, in my opinion. All right, so finally, it's a Brian Schaefer question. And the question is, how is it that despite all the Brian Schaefer podcasts and other coverage that existed prior to Unfound's episode, including some very thorough ones in which Kelly Bruce and other knowledgeable people were involved, your podcast was the first that got into a detailed discussion of the acquaintances of Schaefer who were at the Ugly Tuna during his second visit? And this does not include the man and woman that have Clinton and Alexis. What this questioner, the person asking, is these other people who were there who also happened to know Brian. In fact, despite a ton of research that I'd done prior to hearing your episode, I'd never heard a word about these mysterious acquaintances before. Is this an incredible oversight, or is there some other reason that this group has gotten basically zero attention other than in your episode? Well, what I did was I just went right to the source, and I specifically asked Kelly Bruce, I always mess up her married last name, Kochnauer. So I apologize, Keller, if you're listening. So here was what Kelly said back to me. So I actually she says, discuss the other people that were at the bar that night on the Brian Schaefer Dead or Alive show, podcast, but it was minimal since I was just finding everything out. Once I began getting in more information is when I was approached by a company to go under contract, and part of the contract stated that I couldn't cover the case until the episode aired. I gave that company the information during my interview, but they chose not to use it. After the interview, I began talking about it on the group page I run for Brian in detail. Right around that time is when you decided to cover Brian's case. As far as no one else talking about it, I was told by Columbus Police Department the group was seen leaving before Brian, so they were ruled out. So that's the reason. So it's a combination of Kelly she had known about it for a while, but she wasn't allowed to talk about it because of the contract she had with a particular company. But then that show came out on that company, and so then she was allowed to talk about it. It was just timing. She was allowed to talk about it with me. But then I guess a secondary factor is that, at least according to Columbus Police Department, is that these people were cleared. So it very well may be everybody else who talked about it either didn't know about it because Kelly was the only one who knew about it, or they did know about it, and since Columbus Police Department had cleared them, they just didn't feel like these other people were worth mentioning. That's the best. That's not from me. That's from Kelly. And I don't know what else to say about it. I don't think there's any conspiracy here. I don't think that it's certainly nothing that was made up or anything. I don't know what to make. I don't really. I've already stated what I think happened to Brian Schaefer, but I'm not going to talk about it here. It's an interesting piece of information. I mean, what are the odds that he would show up at some Ugly Tuna and these other people would be there? But it seems like a popular hangout for people who were going to Ohio State University. So, and it doesn't sound to me like they were laboring to keep their names out of the news, or they had threatened anybody. Well, we don't want to be included in any Brian Schaefer's coverage or anything like that. That's just the way the timing, I guess, worked out. I would also say, and you should know, I know this person who asked this question very, very well. He is in the think tank. We've had a lot of back and forth through email. But I would also say is that you also have to remember that a lot of this Brian Schaefer coverage is just regurgitation. There's nobody out there really actually doing any work, finding new information. They're just because Brian Schaefer's disappearance has gotten popular for whatever reason, they say, well, we can get a lot of views by doing this. That's what they do. And they just go rip off other people. If other people haven't talked about it, then they're not going to talk about it either. Whereas we know with Kelly, she's doing original work. So it would stand to reason that she would have information that nobody else would have. And then on top of that, she was just not allowed to say something for quite a while. And it just so happened that she appeared on Unfound when she was allowed to start talking about some of this information that she couldn't mention until that point. So I hope that answers that question. Final question for this Q&A episode number 6. How do you think people can support the missing if a missing person's family members that were in the initial point of contact are deceased? An example would be Tyler Stice, of course, his sister Jessica, very sadly committed suicide in the fall of, I think it was 2017. She was the first Unfound guest to die, and unfortunately we've had quite a few since then. Very, very sad. What it's going to take is people wanting to get involved. I don't know what else to tell you. I think Jessica was an excellent voice for Tyler's disappearance. But Jessica had a lot going on besides Tyler's disappearance. She had lost a child to a drowning, and she'd then become an advocate for teaching kids how to swim so they wouldn't drown. And then somewhere within all of that, the pressure and stress and everything got to her, and she committed suicide somehow. And you should know, I had a messenger talk with her 2 days before she killed herself. And in fact, there were, I don't know if it's still up, but there were pictures of her at some football game or something, just seeming having a great time and everything, like on that preceding Friday, and by Tuesday she was dead. It's going to take people getting involved. If you're waiting for somebody else to do it, then you're probably going to be waiting a long time. And I know that if you're not a family member, for just using Tyler Stice as an example, it's interesting that that one was picked out, given that there's been some controversy with Unfound's coverage and me not allowing a certain other YouTube channel to use the interview and everything, and the answer is always going to be no, and that's not changing. But you got to find a way to do it. It's easy to find reasons not to. It's easy to say, well, they're not going to do this, and I don't have time to do that. And it's very easy to do all that. It's always going to be easy to do nothing. It's really all I can say about it. But you just can't, the way I think about it is you just can't barge in and say, well, she's dead. I want to help out. And I really, at this point, wouldn't even know who to talk to in Tyler's family. Of course, you should know, Jessica thought that, was it the stepfather or father could have something to do with Tyler's disappearance, and that her mother or stepmother might be covering it up. That's something that Jessica thought. I'm not saying I believe that. I'm just telling you, I know that was something that, a theory that Jessica really bought into. All right, I'm not saying I buy into it. I'm telling you she bought into it. So it could make it tough to get involved if you want to go along with Jessica's thinking. Then it's going to be a little dicey. If you wanted to go talk to them, they're going to tell you the truth. I don't know. So in this particular situation with Tyler Stice's disappearance in particular, it could be a little more difficult maybe than some others. But if you're going to use that one as an example, that's going to be tough. There are other ones that there are probably other people to talk to. Other family members who might be involved. But that's not a unique situation, though, with Jessica. I mean, she may be the only family member that gives a dang. It's very common. A lot of the guests who appear on Unfound, they are the only ones in their families who are doing anything, and the rest of the family members don't give a dang. Very common. But the way you go about it is you just inquire whatever John Smith went missing. You track the family down somehow. What I would suggest is you just stick to a disappearance in your area. Somewhere where you can actually maybe go meet somebody in person and look that person in the eye, because then that family member has a lot of trust in you. And you have to take it slow. If you think that you're just going to show up and they're just going to tell you everything that you need to know, it's probably not going to happen. You need to build trust. You need to follow through with what you say you're going to do. That's the way I do it with I think we talked about when we had the assistants as interviews. I talked about, I try to give them some things to do and see if they follow through. Can you do this for me? Can you do that for me? Can you do this for me? I'd like you to, can you look into this? And they show that they can do those things and follow through on their word and do the job pretty decently. Excellent. You need to do the same. Whatever you say that you want to do, you have to follow through with it, but you have to take it slow. And you can't get frustrated. In fact, I would say to any families out there, be suspicious of anybody who says they want to get involved, and the first time you talk to that person, they want to know everything. Be suspicious of those people. The person who is in it for the long haul understands you need to take this slow. You're strangers. There's trust issues. A lot of these families have been scammed before. They've been mistreated. I certainly know from the work that I do that they've been interviewed by other people, and those interviews didn't go very well, on and on and on. These are very, very scarred people. You have to take it slow, and you have to be in it for the long haul. Not just for the next month, but maybe for the next 10 years. And if you're not willing to put that kind of, commitment to it, then I would just stay out of it. That's my advice. And that's the program. Right now, while you are in your podcast platform, Spotify, YouTube, iTunes, wherever, give Unfound a 5-star review, a thumbs up, whatever that platform allows. I thank you for listening. I'm Ed Densel, and you've just finished this episode of Unfound.